This is a story that took place back when I was living with my ex-girlfriend Jasmine. I had recently moved from my parents' house and into an apartment complex where it was surprisingly quieter compared to the suburban area I was used to. Jasmine and I were both college graduates who worked full-time in our respective fields of study. I was in the construction business as I was always a blue-collar kind of guy who enjoyed hands-on work revolving around the trades industry. Jasmine was a financial advisor, so she usually got to work from home while I had the usual 9-to-5 that I've become accustomed to for the latter part of my life. On my off time, I would usually hang out with Jasmine at our local park or simply kick back and binge watch several shows on Netflix till I had completely passed out. Going to our local park around the evening time became a daily occurrence of ours, as rowing back and forth on the swings was Jasmine's way of de-stressing just before the very next day at work. This became a daily routine of ours since moving into the new neighborhood, just so we could feel more comfortable within our new whereabouts. Well, at least with the exception of Saturday nights, when I usually video called 3 close friends of mine from where I originally resided. Their names were Joe, Max, and Steve. This was a way I could stay connected with my friends, as I didn't want to tarnish my friendships with them, nor did I want to be known as the odd friend who cuts people off because he was quote-unquote whipped.
Hey Rick, how's your stay over there?
Must be good getting some action without your parents in the next room, huh?
No comment.
Hey boys, we gonna keep talking about Ricky's love life, or we gonna get this party started? Cheers to that, Stevie boy.
Dang, what's the rush? We have all night, dude. Alright, who wants to go first?
This was how me and my friends socially interacted with one another. We shared our personal scary stories and videos from around the internet that would be categorized within the horror genre. My friends and I have been horror addicts since childhood, so geeking over anything horror related was equivalent to our summer camp days back when we were still in elementary school. I didn't want to abruptly end the so-called tradition we had established despite living miles away from them, so I would make sure I video called them every so often. I recall dozing off from the lackluster stories being shared by my 2 friends Joe and Max, until it was Steve's turn to share his story.
You guys ever been on the dark web?
No, not me.
Not me.
Dude, don't tell me you actually went on it.
I personally didn't, but my younger brother did. He recently showed me this weird snuff film the other day that I thought you guys might like.
I personally felt intrigued by the idea as I didn't know or see much content regarding the dark web. All I knew was that it was a hidden browser that sold illegal products you would find on the street, except everything was online, or at least on the dark side of the internet. That's when Steve extemporaneously invites his younger brother in his room and introduces him.
Hey boys, say hi to my brother Eric.
What up, dude?
What's up, Eric?
You guys want to see something cool? Hell yeah.
Sure, dude.
This better be good or else I want 5 minutes of my life back.
Eric shares his screen and opens up a video from an array of MP4 files shown on a folder. I then saw a low-quality video of a woman suspended in midair with her arms and feet attached with steel chains. She was oriented in this awkward bird-like position, almost like her perpetrator had no intentions of providing any circulation to the woman's extremities. I could see this poor lady desperately wailing This happened to me when I was working at McDonald's. My boss assigned a schedule amongst our staff. I was unfortunately scheduled for the night shift on Fridays. I didn't usually mind as we didn't get a whole lot of business around this time of night. My boss was pretty laid back and didn't mind if I went on my phone during business hours, so long as I got all my work done. I remember dozing off repeatedly due to the fact that I wasn't fully acclimated with the night shift hours. Psst. That's when I heard someone making a psst sound, the kind of sound you make when you try to draw someone's attention. I notice a customer trying to make an order outside, so I quickly greet them with my usual, "Hi, welcome to McDonald's, may I take your order?" I then heard a man say,
"One Whopper, please? Yes, I would like one Whopper, please."
I couldn't tell if he was being a smartass or not, so I ended up saying, "This isn't Burger King, sir. We don't serve that here." I heard him chuckling profusely after I said that. I quickly checked the security camera, only to see a clown. The clown was standing in front of the drive-thru menu without a car. It's not Halloween, why the hell is this guy dressed up like that? I really didn't want to serve this guy, so I decided to use our company policy as a plausible excuse for him to exit the premises. "Hi, sir. Unfortunately, you need to be in a vehicle in order to purchase something here."
"If you don't have a Whopper, I'll take a Baconator instead."
I now could tell this guy was some random psycho harassing me. I instinctively yelled,
"Get the hell out of here before I call the cops!"
I cautiously stick my head out the window, only to see the clown no longer there. A couple hours later, near the end of my shift, I notify my boss and fellow employees regarding the situation. They all dismiss my accusations by saying ignorant things like, "Did you get his autograph?" Or, "It was probably some guy that thought it was Halloween." I annoyingly pretend to be amused and head home. The following Friday, it was my time to work the night shift again. I really dreaded working this shift, especially after what transpired that day. I tried to convince myself that it would be highly unlikely that I encounter that clown again. As time went on, I remember dozing off as I get startled by another psst sound. I urgently check the security camera but don't see anyone present. At this point, I genuinely thought I was hearing things due to my subconscious mind thinking about the clown. My paranoia must have been at the peak of its height. That's when I turn my head towards the drive-thru window, only to see the clown staring dead at me.
"If you don't make me a Big Mac, I will kill you. Trevor."
My heart sank to my stomach. The clown knew my name. I immediately grabbed my cell phone to call the cops, but my hands were trembling so much that I actually wasn't capable of dialing anything. The clown started banging his head on the glass while screaming my name, Trevor, repeatedly.
"Trevor, Trevor, Trevor, I am not loving it! Trevor, 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 Trevor!"
I see blood dripping down from his head. I started shouting from the top of my lungs,
"Leave me alone or I will call the cops!"
The clown runs away as another car approaches the drive-thru lot. I stupidly resume work and wait for my boss to come in. Upon his arrival, I explain the entire situation to him. He then dismisses me by saying,
"Don't sweat it, kid. It was probably some drunk. You can go home now."
As he was talking, I noticed a cut on his forehead. I could even see blood start to drip from it. No. It can't be.
"Goodbye, Trevor."
No! I was a full-time employee at Burger King and had worked a monotonous 10-hour shift every day. The quality of my life wasn't the greatest, as the countless hours of work were starting to become more and more strenuous. I desperately needed money, as I wanted to move out of my grandfather's house and into a residence of my own. My grandfather took the responsibility of taking care of me since I was an infant, due to the tragic loss of my parents. My mother and father had suffered a fatal car crash which granted my grandfather full custody of me. I began comprehending the news as I got older, but oddly enough wasn't too affected by it, as he fit the bill of being the best caretaker that a kid could ever ask for. Playing Duck Hunt was one of my favorite things to do whenever I wasn't so busy at work. My grandfather didn't own any consoles that you would usually see in today's modern day, just the old school Nintendo with the classic gun controller. Hey, Grandpa.
Don't worry about me, son. Pay attention to the game and get that birdie. That's it, Larry. Now go on. Shoot the birdie. Now!
Besides entertaining Grandpa with my spectacular duck hunt skills, I was usually serving customers at the drive-thru of Burger King. I always switched back and forth from the kitchen to providing customer service at the front counter. Our location wasn't usually as busy as most Burger King branches, as we were located by the corner of a quiet residential area, and there weren't many teenagers or kids around. Mostly just an older crowd that were either retired or just big fans of our adversary, McDonald's. Working at Burger King for a long duration of my postgraduate time off made me familiarized with the regulars who would come to dine in. I was usually scheduled for the night shift, so the difference in crowd was pretty evident, as our venue always seemed to attract homeless people or loiterers around this time. Then there was this one guy who would always arrive around 9 p.m. every evening dressed as a Burger King mascot. It was pretty evident this guy was either some crazy lunatic or just a really huge Burger King fan who wanted to look the part. I always got a few laughs and giggles every time I saw him, as the mock-up of the Burger King mascot was pretty accurate but at the same time outlandish. As impressive as his getup was, I was more intrigued by the absurd orders he usually requested. I remember him approaching the front counter as I said, "Hi sir, welcome to Burger King. May I take your order?" The mascot then said,
Give me 30 Whoppers.
"Sir, are you sure you want 30 Whoppers?"
I said 30 Whoppers! Make Whoppers now!
Okay, sir, just the sandwiches, or would you like to make it a combo?
Have it your way.
The mascot then placed about $150 on the counter and began walking towards the seating area. I recall him sitting in one of the booths as the employees in the back began preparing the 30 Whoppers. About 10 minutes later, I bring the stack of Whoppers on a tray towards the mascot's table and notice he had his cell phone held up by a salt shaker with the video camera recording. I placed the tray down and casually walked back behind the front counter. I then saw the mascot completely demolish the Whoppers one by one. It appeared he was either filming a mukbang or just had a preposterous craving for Whoppers. I recall seeing the mascot eat a total of around 10 Whoppers out of the bunch and then pass out from the inevitable itis while drooling on the furniture. The time was around 12 a.m., which was when our restaurant closed for in-dining service, and also when it was the end of my shift. I knew in the back of my head that I had to politely escort the man out, so I slowly approach him as I see him snoring heavily. I gently tap his shoulder and say, "Hello, sir. I unfortunately need to ask you to leave as we're closing."
Give me Whopper. Give me Whopper. Give me Whopper.
Sir, I'm politely asking you to leave.
Make me Whopper, then I leave.
Sir, we can't do that. You need to leave now. I firmly secure my stance with an assertive poker face, while trying not to show any signs that I was nervous as hell. The mascot then gets up and walks out of the restaurant. Calling an Uber was completely necessary, as I wanted to avoid potentially being seen by that weirdo on the street or public transit. The time was roughly 1 a.m. when I made it home and immediately got in the shower. My paranoia began setting in, as all I could hear was weird noises coming from outside my shower curtain.
Grandpa, is that you?
That's when I heard the same Burger King mascot voice from earlier saying,
Open the door.
What the hell? How'd you get inside my house? Open the door! Open the door! Open the door! Get the hell out of here!
Fine, have it your way.
That's when the man grabbed a hold of the door hinges and repeatedly slammed his head against the door.
Get the hell out of my house or I'm calling the cops!
As the mascot continued slamming his head, I remembered my grandpa secretly keeping one of his handguns stashed in the bathroom cabinets. I took it out and pointed it towards the door as I said,
Please don't make me do this. Please just go. I have a lot to live for.
Here's Johnny!
The mascot successfully plummets his head through the door. Just then, I see my grandpa standing next to me. I shout,
Grandpa, help me!
That's it, Larry. Now go on. Shoot the birdie. Now!
I pulled the trigger and said,
Look, Grandpa, I did it! I killed the birdie! Aren't you proud of your grandson? I still got it, don't I?
This story occurred around the early 2000s, back when I was still in elementary school. I was in my early teens, so the monotonous school life was something I always dreaded. My mom always picked me up from school as her workplace was just down the street, so getting a ride was always less strenuous than walking home. She would usually stop by our local McDonald's just before heading home, as she didn't really prepare home-cooked meals due to the exhaustion of being a single mother. As much as I adored my mom, the lack of home-cooked meals and abundance of McDonald's always kept me out of shape for the latter part of my teen years. The one thing I found genuinely pleasing about that McDonald's was the enormous play place attached to the restaurant itself. My mom usually dropped me off there to play with my neighborhood friends and acquaintances, as long as I got the majority of my schoolwork done. There was this one occasion, though, that really disturbed me to my core, and it seeps into my daily thoughts from time to time. I remember being picked up from school and heading over to that same McDonald's venue to pick up some takeout for that evening. As we got inside, I recall my mom ordering the usual Big Mac combo while I casually glanced at the play place through the glass window of where the eating area was.
Jimmy, what drink would you like? Jimmy? Son? What drink would you like?
I remember zoning out at this particular moment and could recall the echoes of my mom calling out for me. It was almost as if I couldn't move a muscle, like my entire body was in a state of shock traveling through space and time into another dimension. It felt like it was just me in the play place, like I had the entire setup all to myself.
Jimmy, what drink do you want?
I'll get a Coke, Mom. As my mom headed back to complete the rest of the order, I could recall seeing the reflection of a Ronald McDonald clown standing from a distance behind me, almost like he wanted my attention. I casually pretend like I don't see him by keeping my eyes glued to the glass and not bothering to turn around.
I know you can see me on the reflection of the glass.
That's when I casually turn towards the direction of the clown and say, can I help you, sir?
Yes, my dear boy. Do you or your mother want to see what a pyromaniac can do with a little fire?
We're just here to pick up a Big Mac, so no
Maybe I can cook you a delicious giant Big Mac with my fire abilities so that you will never need to come to McDonald's again.
Hey, leave us alone or I will call the cops.
Go ahead and call them. I'll just teach my cellmates how to start a fire and make an explosion oh so beautiful.
Let's get out of here, Jimmy.
That's when we get inside my mom's vehicle and drive away from the McDonald's. Or should I say the clown. About a week after that bizarre encounter, I spent the majority of my time playing Duck Hunt on my Nintendo as my computer lacked the entertainment that today's modern computer has. I eventually went back to that local McDonald's as I surprisingly missed the food, but more importantly, the play place. As the day transitioned into the evening, my mom dropped me off there as the company of the local teens in the neighborhood made her feel a little more comfortable doing so.
I'll be back at 10 p.m. sharp. Call me if you want me to pick you up earlier, okay?
Okay, Mom. I decided to call my neighbor friend Chris using the payphone located outside the McDonald's venue. Hello? Hey, Chris, it's Jimmy. You still coming to McDonald's tonight? Oh, hell yeah, I'll be there in one...
Hey there, long time no see. What the hell do you want? Let me show you how I make my fire. Get the hell away from me or I'll call the cops. Fine, have it your way then. Your little behind couldn't handle all this smoke anyway.
That's when I ran inside the McDonald's and immediately made my way inside the play place. I honestly could have notified a McDonald's employee, or any stranger for that matter, but I ultimately decided to take the high road and waited out until it was time for my mom to pick me up. I remember making my way up through the tunnels of the playground as I just wanted to reach the very top and avoid any further encounters with any other weirdos. I eventually reached the top of the platform and remember basking in the view, as the array of colors from the ball pit was always something I found oddly satisfying to look at. That's when I noticed a familiar head beginning to protrude from the balls in the pit. It was the clown. The same clown from earlier, looking up at me with his ominous smile and revolting eyes. What the hell is going on? Why isn't anyone acknowledging this freak? The clown just stood there looking at me as if nothing mattered besides myself and his existence.
I know you can hear me up there.
What the hell do you want?
I killed your mother, Jimmy. Now it's only you and your stupid neighbors left.
What the hell are you talking about?
Jump!
Hell no, leave me alone!
Oh, don't worry, it's totally safe, Jimmy. Now jump.
No, I'm not doing it.
Jump! Jump! Jump!
That's when I look to my left and see my friend Chris right next to me. We have no choice. What the hell?
Now it's your turn, you little brats! Jump! 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 Jump!
I began to close my eyes and hyperventilate as I felt a sudden surge of adrenaline flowing through my body. But then I began to feel a rather odd sensation, something like a fiery substance burning the hairs on the back of my neck off. That's when I open my eyes and find myself on my apartment balcony with my entire building engulfed in flames.
What the hell? Somebody help me! Help! I hope you all burn in hell and are loving it. I hate you, Dad! You will always and will forever be a clown! I hate you, you stupid, stupid clown! Help! Somebody please call 911! Help! Help me! Somebody please call 911! Help!
I was a high school graduate that recently got hired for full-time work at KFC. We were the biggest chicken venue around town, as places like Popeyes weren't as big of a franchise at the time. Our hours of operations were usually 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., sometimes 12 p.m. for close if it was the weekend. The job came second nature to me. It was always clock in, clean up, fry the chicken, and of course assist any customers at the cashier. There was one memorable time when I was on my way to work and encountered a homeless man that literally dressed up as the Colonel. I was initially a little skeptical that he was homeless from his fancy attire, but from the rumors circulating from the other employees, he had recently started panhandling around the area for the past several weeks. As I made my way towards the front door, the Colonel raises his plastic cup at me and says,
"Me lad, spare an old fella some change?"
"Sir, I only make minimum wage."
"If it wasn't for me, KFC wouldn't exist, kid. At least spare me some leftover chicken during your lunch break, okay?"
"Get a job, old man." The first initial weeks of the job were swell, but things took a sudden turn for the worst. We had started running low on chicken, and my boss began to point the finger at me. He assumed I had been taking home chicken after my shift was done, but I assured him it wasn't me. This began happening on multiple occasions where large batches of chicken suddenly started disappearing. It had come to a point where my boss began to threaten my job. I pleaded with my boss to investigate the day shift employees, but it was impossible for them to find culprits as he supervised them during that shift.
"Stop eating my chicken, kid!"
"Sir, it's not me. I bring my own lunch."
"If any more chicken goes missing in this kitchen, you're fired, you hear me?"
"Yes, sir." It was finally that time again. The night shift. Or should I say, my potential last shift at KFC. My pride and ego wouldn't allow me to accept the fact that I was being falsely accused, so I remained at the front counter, while occasionally looking behind my shoulder every 5 minutes or so. The time was roughly 11:50 p.m. on a Friday. I was just about to wrap up another successful shift until I heard a loud thud coming from the kitchen area. I began to cautiously walk to the back and saw no sign of anyone. No raccoons, no lurking intruders, just the standard kitchen appliances with the drive-through window securely locked in place. That's when I heard a sound coming from the stockroom where we kept all our inventory. I could hear the sound of vigorous chewing as I approached the door. I knew someone had to be in there eating all our fried chicken. Was this going to be the day I finally catch the culprit in the act? I placed my hand on the door handle and opened the door in one swift motion, unveiling the same Colonel I had seen before, dousing his face with fried chicken. My suspicions were accurate. The reason for all the missing chicken stood there before me.
How the hell did you get in here? Boy, I couldn't resist. Y'all make a big enough batch to feed the whole town, might I say.
It was you. You were the one that was eating our chicken the whole time.
How could I not? It's so finger-licking good. Ah!
I slammed the door shut, making sure to lock it so I didn't have to get physical with the Colonel. He then started violently punching the door with his bare fists as I stood back in awe, not knowing whether I should call the cops or run the hell out of there.
Open the door, or I'm gonna show you a new meaning to finger-licking good, kid. Leave me alone before I call the cops!
I sprinted towards the front counter while arming myself with a knife from the kitchen. I began dialing 911 while trying to explain to the operator the bizarre situation I was in. After a long 10 to 15 strenuous minutes, the police finally showed face. I began directing them to the stockroom where I had initially trapped the man. A group of armed policemen rammed their way through the door only to see no sign of the Colonel. What we then discovered was that there was a panel on the ceiling that had been removed, thus allowing access for any culprit to enter and exit the building at their convenience. After further investigation, it was later found out through parking lot surveillance cameras that the Colonel had been sneaking through the KFC building every night through the same panel on the roof leading to the stockroom. He had been eating our chicken for God knows how long. What makes the story more discomforting was how he would casually jump across the roof and into the KFC bucket sign, just so he could crawl inside and sleep there every night. All I know is that that man is mentally sick in the head and needs to seek some kind of professional help. About several years ago, I used to work at an engineering firm where I would get carpal tunnel from typing on the keyboard all day. It was currently a Friday, so I figured I'd treat myself to a beer after my shift was done. Figured I could get hammered for a change, instead of heading home to an empty house with no female companionship. During my lunch break, I remember Googling any nearby pub and bar to go to. I came across a Hooters that was located about 15 minutes away by vehicle. I had previously been to many Hooters in the past and always found it quite charming to say the least. If I had to describe it, I would say it was like your ordinary sports bar, accompanied by some of the finest girls who wore their distinctive Hooters attire, of course with the orange shorts. Like I said before, I had been to many Hooters venues in the past, so going to this new location was really refreshing. As I made my arrival, it was roughly evening time, which meant that the place was probably hoarded with customers. I pushed open the front doors and saw exactly what I had anticipated. A bunch of attractive Hooters waitresses and a bunch of men flirting with them who were old enough to be the girls' fathers. I made my way across the bar while slowly glancing at the array of bottles behind this attractive bartender. I casually leaned against the bar as she approaches me saying,
What you drinking today, big guy?
Rum and Coke, please. The waitress then begins whipping up the concoction while staring across the bar at someone. At first, I couldn't tell exactly what she was looking at, but then I saw a rather large gentleman sitting at a table alone, making direct eye contact with her. If I had to describe the man, I would say he was in his late 40s and had a beer gut hanging onto his lap. I assumed he was just some creep who had a crush on the bartender. As the Hooters lady began serving my drink, I nosily asked her, Hey, is everything okay?
Not really. That weirdo across the room keeps looking at me.
He's probably just a big fan of your drinks.
Yeah. Not to mention there's been a rumor circulating around town. Hooters girls have gone missing.
What? Are you freaking kidding me?
Hey, make me a beer, lady.
Get someone else to do it. I'm about to clock out, pal.
Make me a beer or else I'm telling your boss your shorts are tight enough to see your—
Leave her alone now!
About 5 minutes after that bizarre encounter, I felt obligated to escort the lady outside the parking lot, and even went as far as to offer her a lift. The lady took me up on my offer as she wanted to avoid further confrontation with any creeps lurking in the night. As I drove down the street, I began striking up a decent conversation with the lady. Everything was pretty swell till she asked,
So, where are you heading after?
"What do you mean?
Like, after you drop me off? Are you heading home?
Who says you're heading home?
What?
You know, you should really be more careful before getting into a stranger's car. After all, Hooters waitresses have been disappearing, haven't they?"
No! No, stop! Stop! Somebody help me! No!
Huh. I guess there's no after party. Good thing I ordered a cab when I did. Now if it'll only get here. Stupid cab drivers can never figure out how to pull up to an address. What is this guy doing? Hello?
Who am I speaking with?
I'm your fare. Where are you?
Oh, it's you. I'm right here.
Huh? Whoa. Alright, I'm coming. It takes him an hour to get here, but then he sneaks up on me. That's just great. Hello?
Hey, what are you doing out so late?
I was partying. Then I was waiting for you.
Oh, so you're gonna be one of those people who leaves a bad review.
No, I'll tip and everything. I just want to get home. That party sucked.
Well, maybe next time you should send me an invite.
Sure, dude.
Why did I get in the front seat? This guy is such a pain. What are you watching there?
I'm just watching TikToks. Could you keep your eye on the road, please?
I know how to drive a car, dipshit. It's my job. I was just trying to make conversation.
Okay. It's all just Grimace Shake videos, alright?
Oh yeah, I've seen those. Doesn't it make you want to get one?
Not really.
Have you ever tried one?
Nope.
Then let's go get some, right now.
Wait, I didn't want to stop by McDonald's. I just wanted to be dropped home, dude.
What are you saying?
I'm saying I just want to go home. I don't want to stop anywhere, so making me would be unprofessional.
Where do you have to go that's so important? I want a Grimace Shake, and since you think you could tell me how to do my job, you're gonna pay for it!
Hey, watch out! I don't have any money!
Don't lie to me, you slimy prima donna!
Watch out!
Hey! Open your eyes and get your money out, you wimp! And don't you dare piss yourself on my seat! Hey, anyone in there? The sign says you're open. Hello? What's that supposed to mean? Talk to me like a normal person!
My name is Shelly, and 10 years ago, I wanted to make my own money because I was tired of asking my parents for money. I put in a lot of applications and I ended up getting hired at Chick-fil-A. I'm not going to lie, I was definitely excited because of all of the chicken nuggets I was going to be eating. Anyways, after I got hired, I started to get the hang of the job. It was pretty easy. I worked outside in the drive-thru line a lot because we were the busiest fast food restaurant in our town, and people really liked my personality. After working there for a few months, my dad's creepy friend Tyler would come there every day at the same time and go to the same drive-thru line, which was weird because I worked there after school and there were 2 drive-thru lines. The drive-thru line he'd always go to was mine, and he would always call me Shell Shell, which I've hated since I was a small kid. The thing is, he'd always order small stuff like a small fry or a small cookies and cream milkshake. A few times he came into the line, pull up to me, and then he'd say that he forgot his debit card, and he would just try and talk to me. I'm not dumb. I knew exactly what he was doing. Ever since I turned 13, he always acted weird toward me, telling me that I'm growing up into a woman, or that I look like a young woman now. There was this time when my parents were having a get-together with family and friends, and I yelled out to my parents that I had to pee, and I ran upstairs. I swear, a few seconds later, Tyler burst through the door, looked at me and said, "Wow," and stared at me. Then he straightened up real quick and said, "Sorry, my bad," and closed the door. Like I said, he was weird. So we closed at 10 p.m., but we always take orders up until around 9:59. One day, we were inside cleaning up, and it was around 10:30 p.m. There were about 5 or 6 of us in Chick-fil-A at the time. I was mopping the floor, and a few of us saw a car pull up to the drive-thru, but turned around at the entrance because we put cones out there after 10 p.m. The car drove around our parking lot at least 10 minutes, and I noticed that it had temporary tags on it. After a while, our manager went outside and went up to the car due to it stopping in front of one of our windows every time it drove around. I watched the manager walk to the car as the driver rolled down the window. The window was all the way down before my manager reached the car, and to my surprise, it was Tyler, my dad's friend. He had a new car that I didn't recognize, but what made this very weird was that even when he rolled the window down, he never looked at my manager. He was staring directly at me, talking with my manager. I was standing behind the entrance door. He saw me looking at him, looking at me, but he never turned away like a normal person would. My manager walked back in and told me and my coworkers to hurry up so we can get out of here. I was the last person to get done with my closing, so it was just me and my manager. My manager told me to make sure the doors are locked. I told him okay, then I went to the bathroom. I figured I'd lock them once I'm done. As usual, I was on my phone while using the bathroom, and the bathroom door opens. I thought it was weird because my manager is the only other person in the building, and he's a guy. I yelled out that he's an idiot and he's in the wrong bathroom, but the thing is, he never left. It got weirder because I can hear him breathing by the door, but then I heard, "Shell, Shell, it's me, Tyler Poop. Are you in here?" I picked up my feet so he couldn't see them. But then he started to push open every stall door, saying my name. I texted my boss and it literally said, "Help, bathroom." Then Tyler got to my stall. He attempted to push the door open and then he laughed. He said that he knows that I'm in there. He looked in the crack of the door and said, "There you are." He then got down on his hands and knees, reached his hand under the door and attempted to unlock the stall. I kicked his arm and he said, "It's me, Uncle Tyler." As he said that, he proceeded to crawl under my stall door. I started to climb above my stall, then my manager burst through the door as I was screaming and crying. Tyler and my manager began to fight. I called the cops. After a few seconds, Tyler was unconscious on the bathroom floor. When the cops and the EMS got there, he was cuffed and loaded up into the ambulance. He was hit with a few charges and was recently released from jail. That situation just heightened my awareness of my surroundings. It was Halloween of 2012, and I was closing at work, which is Chick-fil-A. We were a new establishment in the area that we're in, and the neighborhood was pretty bad. In and out all afternoon and evening, I saw hundreds of people dressed in their costumes. All of the cliche costumes, Jason, Freddy Krueger, and Michael Myers. At around 7:30, there was a long line inside, and out of nowhere there was some commotion. My manager came out to break it up. When he broke it up, some guy in the Ghostface costume from Scream ran out of the door. That person that ran out of the door got into it with a woman that was dressed as Meg from Family Guy. At least that's what I thought she was, until she told us that she wasn't in costume. She was just ugly. Anyway, this woman told our manager and the cops that some person in a Ghostface costume tried to lure her 7-year-old daughter out of the building to his car. The little girl was running back and forth between her mother, who was in line, and the play area inside. I guess the man in the Scream costume told the girl that her mom told her to wait in his car, and he grabbed her. The mom turned around and saw it. Then she started to yell and scream. A few hours later, we locked the doors, and then some guy knocked at our drive-through window. He had on a Ghostface costume from the movie Scream, but I don't know if it was the same guy from earlier. I yelled out that we're closed, and this guy tries to bust through the drive-through window. I screamed, and the manager ran out, and then that man ran to our front door banging. Then he stopped and just stared at us. At that point, it was just my manager and I. My manager called the cops, and the man left and popped his trunk of his car. He grabbed something out of his trunk and put it under his costume. He then walked back up to the front door. He stared for another 30 seconds and pulled out a gun from under his costume, aimed it and pulled the trigger. We both ducked and screamed, but nothing happened. We looked up and he was fumbling with his gun. He was loading, unloading, and reloading. It had jammed. Then the cops showed up with their guns drawn. He got on the ground and they arrested this guy. We found out that this was a dangerous guy and he had a huge rap sheet, and we were pretty lucky that nothing happened to us that night. It may be cowardly, but I quit that job soon after that happened because of the neighborhood that Chick-fil-A was in.
I'm a female who used to work at Chick-fil-A when I was in my late teens and early 20s. Overall, it was a fun place to work and I made lots of friends. Everyone who worked there was super nice, which is why I stayed working there for so long. However, at one point, we hired a new guy named Justin. From the day he started working there, Justin just seemed like a jerk. He was rude and selfish and would do things like go on his phone during shifts, take really long bathroom breaks, and leave early. I found out he was a relative to one of our managers, and as a favor to his family, she was able to get him a job. He was a somewhat troubled guy who had gotten into some problems before, but it was thought that the job would help him out. For the first few weeks, though, it didn't. For the most part, when I first met him, though, he was rather nice to me. Shortly after that, he asked me out during a shift, though. He basically asked what I was doing and if I wanted to hang out or go someplace with him. I really didn't want to and told him that I was busy. Over the next few times that we worked together, he remained persistent and would ask me to hang out after work or something like that almost every time. When I would say no or come up with excuses, he would seem to grow increasingly angry. I also heard from another female worker that he had been doing the same to her. He was a bigger guy, almost looked like a football player as he was over 6 feet tall with very short hair and strong looking. One night, he asked me to hang out after work because he saw me clocking out for my lunch break. I told him no again, but this time he grabbed my arm. He asked me why in a very serious and frustrated tone. I told him I was sorry, but I just really didn't want to. The way he aggressively grabbed me made me kind of worried, and I decided in that moment I would have to talk to my boss because I had really had enough of him. The rest of my shift was really busy, and as it was time for dinner, we had a big rush. I didn't get a chance to speak with my boss, Christine, and I even forgot about the situation. Finally, after things quieted down and we were no longer busy, my shift was over and it was time for me to go home. I clocked out and then got my coat and headed for my car. As I approached my car, I suddenly saw somebody jump out from behind it. Where I was parked, it was at the back side of the restaurant that was bordering a grassy area with a couple of trees. I saw the person who had jumped out was Justin. I was really surprised to see him. He said to me that I had no reason to dislike him and asked me what my problem was. I told him I really didn't have a problem with him, I just wanted to go home. He was standing blocking my driver's door, and I knew it would be hard for me to get around him. I asked him if he should get back to work. He then told me that he was off and he had been off for 2 hours just waiting for me. Obviously, this creeped me out even more. He then stepped towards me and grabbed my arm again. When he did, he shoved me in the opposite direction. There was a car parked 2 spaces away, and I guess it was his because I heard it unlock. He then shoved me to the car and told me to get inside. I asked him why. He said he just wanted to talk. When he said this, his voice seemed to lighten up. I figured maybe I could have an actual conversation with him and let him know he needed to leave me alone and these things are not okay. I reluctantly got inside the car. Justin shut the door and then walked around and got inside to the driver's seat. But instead of talking to me, he immediately started up the car and began backing out. He also locked all of the doors in the process. Right away, I got a terrible feeling. I asked him what he was doing. He said to shut up and then cursed at me. He then went on a short rant about how he hated working and how he had just quit. As he did this, the car started to speed up and he merged onto a busier road. I knew I was in trouble and took out my phone from my pocket and immediately went to dial 911. Justin saw me doing this, and I was just barely able to hit call on my phone. I could hear the ringing on the other end, but no more than a couple of seconds of this, and Justin reached over and grabbed my phone. He yelled at me and we wrestled over the phone for a couple of seconds. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to pull it away from him fast enough. He got control of my phone and then rolled down his window and tossed the phone out onto the side of the road. He then kept on driving. I was terrified. I knew that I could no longer call for help and decided that I had to try to think of something to do. Justin just kept on driving down the road at a really fast speed. None of us said a word for several minutes. I was just doing my best to think about what I could possibly do to try to escape. Then, suddenly I saw the amazing sight of flashing lights behind us. Justin started yelling and cursing, and eventually he pulled over. The police pulled over with him, and as soon as the car stopped, Justin opened his door and took off into the woods. I saw the police officer run after him, and I got out of the car. The officer told me to stay put, and then he called for backup. Eventually, more officers arrived, and a short time later, I heard that they had caught Justin after a foot chase. The police told me they had received a 911 call from my phone, and even though I didn't talk to anyone, they decided to investigate the area the call was made from. They only originally pulled over Justin because he was speeding, but after he took off running, they went after him. I was so grateful that I was all right and got out of that situation. After that, I took some time off of work and eventually returned to work there for a short time more.
Back when I was living on the streets, well, technically in my car, I would always post up by fast food restaurants because people would always give me their change or some of the food that they had recently purchased. One day I posted at the entrance of a plaza, and in that plaza the busiest place was a Chick-fil-A. Throughout the day I received a few bucks and a lot of chicken nuggets. After being out there for a few hours, I noticed a car that left a few times and came back to park in the Chick-fil-A parking lot with covered license plates. But the person never got out of the car. Of course I thought it was weird, but I didn't think anything of it. Throughout the day, I'd take my food to my car and I'd eat. Around 8 p.m., most of the plaza was closing up, and the traffic started to slow down. Finally, when Chick-fil-A slowed down for a few minutes, a man in the car got out and he walked up to the door of the restaurant and took a picture of the inside. A few seconds later, what looked like the manager came outside, and it looked like she was arguing with the guy. She went back inside and the man got back in his car, got on his phone, and left about 5 minutes later. FYI, I was parked about 25 feet away from the Chick-fil-A parking lot and could see everything that was going on. So a few hours go by and the place was closed. From the outside, it looked as if the employees were cleaning up. I was trying to fall asleep, then I saw that car from earlier pull up. Then it woke me all the way up. There were 2 cars left in the parking lot. His car and some other car. And some people left. The only person I saw inside was the woman that he was talking to earlier. I saw the man get out of his car at this point. He was wearing dark colors and with gloves on. And I saw the lights get turned off inside of Chick-fil-A. The man was standing on the side of the building by a dumpster, but in a way where he can't be seen. He was in the shadows. At that point, I leaned my seat all the way back so no one could see me. The woman walked out, turned around, and began to lock the door. As soon as she turned around, that man sprinted toward her, yanked her hair, and started to yell at her as he took her back inside. I leaned up a little bit to get a better look, but I couldn't see anything. There was nothing for about 10 minutes, until the man walked back outside. He went straight to his car, but instead of driving away, he drove up to the door and went back in with his trunk left open. A few minutes later, I saw something that I would never forget. The man was dragging the woman's body, but there was no head. He struggled to get her in the trunk, but eventually he got her there. He went back in there and came out with a Chick-fil-A bag full of something and threw it in his trunk. He went back inside again for what seemed like 20 minutes. He came back out, locked up Chick-fil-A, and drove away. Someone else came back for the other car in the parking lot. A few days later, I went into a Starbucks to use the restroom, and on the news was a story about a missing woman. They showed the picture, and it was the woman who worked at Chick-fil-A. They were interviewing her husband, who was crying during the whole interview. What creeped me out is that her husband was the man that I saw with her that fateful night. I know he killed her, but he was on the news as if he didn't have anything to do with it, and like he doesn't know. Seeing that lady that night has haunted me since.
Ever since I first went to Chick-fil-A, it's been one of my favorite restaurants. I've always loved their chicken sandwiches, and their sauce always hits the spot. However, the college that I recently graduated from is in an area where there's no Chick-fil-A nearby, so when I was at school, I could never have it. Last year, when the semester finally came to an end, I was driving back home to get to my parents' house, and I had the idea to get Chick-fil-A. I left my school in the morning, and it was a 4-hour drive to get back home. When I got about an hour away from home, my cravings got the better of me and I saw a Chick-fil-A and stopped. It was a Chick-fil-A that I had never been to before, but it looked relatively new and was very busy. I got in the drive-thru line, which was long but moving fast. I ordered the number 1, which is what I usually got, of a chicken sandwich, fries, and a drink. I was so hungry that I decided to park and eat it there. The Chick-fil-A was in a large shopping area that had a mall with a really big parking lot connected to it. So I drove to an open area of the mall parking lot that wasn't very busy. I started to eat, but before long I was kind of annoyed with the way that the sun was shining right into my front window onto me. I moved parking spaces down to where there was a shady spot near a tree. As I backed up my car out of the spot and started to drive, I saw that there was another car that was parked a little ways away from me that started to leave at the same time. I drove over and parked next to a tree, and the car followed me and parked about 10 spots away from me. I found it odd, but overall was more focused on eating. A while later, when I decided to continue with my drive home, I had forgotten all about the car and started to drive away. But when I did, I noticed the car start to drive with me. I never bothered to look to see who was driving it, and it was too far away to tell by this point. I once again found it odd, but what could I do? I got back on the road and then merged onto the freeway that was close by. I noticed the entire time that the car that was seemingly following me did the same. I got kind of worried when I saw this. I wondered why someone would follow me. Had I accidentally cut him off or something before? I kept on driving down the road and the car remained behind me the entire time. I tried some things like slowing down or changing lanes, but he kept following me. I still couldn't really tell much about how the driver looked because I still wasn't able to get a very good look at him. The closer I got to home, the more concerned I became because I didn't want to go all the way home and have this guy potentially know where I live. When I got about 10 minutes away from home, I decided to pull off the highway again and take the exit. I didn't really have much of a plan, but I knew I shouldn't go to my house with somebody following me. There was a little town that had a few stores and gas stations. I pulled into the parking lot of a supermarket and parked in a spot in the back where there weren't many other cars. Of course, the car that was following me did as well. I got out my phone and called my parents. I was going to tell them that I had been followed and ask them what to do. But before I could finish telling them, I saw that the car had parked in a spot behind me and a few spaces to the left. I noticed that the driver's door of the car opened, and both passengers' doors in the back did as well. I saw 3 large men all get out of the car and start heading towards me. In this moment, as they approached my car, I panicked and slammed my foot on the gas pedal and sped away. I saw the men then stop and begin to run back to their car. This is where I got lucky in a way. There happened to be a police car that was driving on the quiet road connecting the supermarket with other businesses. When he saw me speeding away in an almost reckless way, he pulled me over. The car that was following me slowed down too, but then drove away. When the officer got to my window, he told me I was driving a little wild, and I told him my situation. He then gave me just a warning to slow down and drive safer, and offered to drive behind me for a few miles to make sure that I wasn't followed. I took him up on the offer, and luckily I was able to make it home safely without ever seeing that car again. I still wonder sometimes though why that car was following me for so long, and what the men wanted. This story happened about a year ago. I was at Chick-fil-A with my girlfriend one night. It was one of both of our favorite restaurants, and we would get it all the time. Usually we would go through the drive-thru, but tonight we decided to eat inside the restaurant. It was a little bit later at night, and not very many other people were there at all. We sat in a booth on the far side of the restaurant, and were all by ourselves for the most part. We were eating, joking around, and just having normal conversation, when all of a sudden I heard a banging at the window right in front of me. We were sitting by the window, so I was super startled. Because it was dark out and the way the window was, I couldn't really see out of it very well at first, but when I looked, I saw a man. There was a guy who looked pretty mean. He was angrily banging on the glass right in front of us. My girlfriend and I were both pretty startled, and we watched the man to see what his problem was. He started to yell something at us, but I couldn't understand what he was yelling. The man wore a dark sweatshirt with the hood up and appeared to wear glasses and have a brown goatee. I don't know if he was insane or what, because I certainly hadn't done anything to make him angry. The man then suddenly stopped yelling and turned his back on us, then sprinted away into the night. My girlfriend and I both looked at each other in shock. "What was that?" she asked. I figured the guy was insane or on drugs or something like that, but we were both just glad that he was gone. Like many Chick-fil-A's, it was next to multiple businesses, so we figured he had come from one of those. We both talked about it for a few minutes, and then were ready to go back home. I had to use the bathroom, so I told my girlfriend that I would be right back and then we would leave. I walked inside the bathroom and to the urinal and did my business. As I was in there though, I remember seeing someone was using one of the stalls in the men's room. When I was done, I got to the sink and began washing my hands, when I heard the stall door start to open. I casually looked over to see who was coming out. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the same man who had been outside. He stopped in his place and just stared at me. Then, slowly, a really wide and creepy grin came over his face. I didn't waste any time and quickly left the bathroom as fast as I could. I saw my girlfriend was waiting for me by the door, and she could see the panic on my face. She asked me what was wrong, and I just told her we had to go. I didn't pay any attention to if the man followed us or not. When we got to the car, I told my girlfriend about how I had seen the man in the bathroom. She was really shocked to hear this, and we drove home after that. Thankfully, we never saw the man again. What was the most crazy thing is that we had a view of the only entrance to the restaurant the entire time, and we never saw the man come inside the door. I don't know how he was suddenly inside the bathroom, but thinking about it gives me the creeps. I worked at a Chick-fil-A a few years back. This was the weirdest thing to ever happen. When I worked there, I would oftentimes be at the drive-thru window handing customers their food. On one day, I don't remember the exact day of the week, but I know it was a weekday. Things were not all that busy and it was in the afternoon. I remember we had a lot of cars in the drive-thru and I dealt with many different people. At one point though, I recognized a man that I was handing food to. He had been there not long ago. It was a little weird, but I gave him his food and moved on. Then I saw him again about 20 minutes later. This time, he only ordered a drink. I gave it to him and he left, only to come back again 10 minutes later ordering another drink. This time, I jokingly made a comment to the man that he was here again. but the man denied it. He claimed this was his first time there and I was wrong. He also didn't seem very friendly at all. He kind of said it in a rude way. I gave him his drink and he left. I didn't see him for another 30 minutes or so, but then he came back again. This time, he just got a water. Every time he would come back, he would seemingly order just one small thing. I was really confused by this behavior. He came back several more times, getting small items each time, and he seemed angry as well. It was one of the strangest things that I had seen. I got off of work that night, and on my way home had to stop at the store to get a couple of things. I was in the store for no longer than 5 minutes, when suddenly I saw the same man walking down an aisle about 20 feet away. He didn't seem to notice me. I thought this was an insane coincidence.
What you want to do is save hundreds when Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance.
That's great, but can you ask your friend to stop digging into the green?
I can ask, but he's not going to. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Copper Tone Sport helps protect against UV rays, resisting sweat, heat, and water.
And I felt kind of creeped out because of just how crazy it was. I ended up leaving the store shortly after, and in the coming days I forgot about the man for the most part. But less than a week later, I was at my house taking out the trash when I saw the same man once again. This time he was walking down my street. I lived in a fairly big neighborhood, but I had never seen him prior to being at the Chick-fil-A. I felt really creeped out and went back inside. I'm not sure if the man saw me or not, but after that occurrence, I've never seen the man since. I just think it's really creepy how all that happened. Sometimes I wonder if he was stalking me or something like that. In fact, it's so crazy that a lot of people don't believe me when I tell them this story. But I know what happened. Either way, I'm glad I haven't seen the man since.
This happened about a month ago. I'm doing much better now, and for my future jobs, I will never take night shifts, as the dark alone gives me the creeps. I've applied for many jobs because I'm the legal age for working, as I'm in high school. I'm in desperate need of money, and I need to help my family out as well, so at this point, I would take any job I can get. 5 jobs accepted me, so I decided to do a trial at my first job that was pretty quick enough to accept, which happened to be McDonald's. I need to say that the staff and the manager were all very nice, and my friend also works there, which was a total bonus. The only really downfall working there was probably the customers, which my friend agreed. But anyway, I didn't really know what to pick for the shifts, or even if I wanted the job, so I asked for a practice shift. My manager happily agreed and let me choose my times. Instead of daytime shift, I chose the night, which was a very bad decision, but hey, I needed to see what it was like working there anyway, so this will be easy since it's night, right? Well, I was terribly wrong. I got ready in my friend's uniform that she let me borrow, and she even drove me there. I'll be honest, the McDonald's was rather sketchy. When I say sketchy, I mean there's so many alcoholics and druggies around, and upon arrival it just didn't feel right. During the car ride, I had a gut feeling that it wasn't going to be a good shift, but my friend kept reassuring me that all will be fine. She dropped me off at the bus stop, which was 5 minutes from my workplace, and said that she would pick me up at 12 a.m. It was around 10 p.m., so my practice shift lasts for about 2 hours. I agreed and said for her to pick me up at the same spot that she dropped me off at. As she sped off, I merely watched as her car shrunk into the distance. After I saw it was gone, I started walking towards McDonald's, but while walking, I began to hear footsteps behind me. I didn't really think much of it because it was a normal thing. The person was probably just walking to their car or McDonald's or even the shops, but I had a really bad feeling. I felt like I was almost being watched, and I stopped for a second. The footsteps stopped with mine, and I looked behind to see a guy around his mid-40s just eyeing me off. I got really weirded out as he just smiled at me, and then breathed very heavily. He was taller than me, and he looked rather stronger and bigger than me as well. He was around what looked to be a few meters away. I quickly looked away and ran off to my workplace. There was only about 3 people working, my manager and my male friend. It was about 10:30 p.m. and I had already had a share of drunken rude people filling the orders up, or even tried hitting on me. But he quickly left, and shortly afterwards, my friend showed up and helped me. He helped me out with most things, and I felt rather safe with him. He was actually an acquaintance of mine, but we soon grew to be best friends. After I was done taking some drunk guy's order, my friend pulled me aside and asked if I knew the guy outside. I was kind of confused at what he meant, and at first I thought he was just joking around. That is, until he pointed at the right window. My mouth went dry, and my face completely dropped. It was the same creepy guy that was following me before work. But I didn't tell him that. Instead, because I was an idiot, I kinda just laughed a bit and said that it was no big deal. He shrugged it off and we went back into the kitchen. It hit 11 p.m. No more customers were present and the same guy would not stop staring at me. At that point, I kind of just held my head down and just begged, hoping that he wouldn't come in. I could just feel his beady eyes run up and down my body. It was gross. It made me feel dirty. He's been there ever since the start of my shift and has been there for about 30 minutes, making it 10:30 now. I started to panic a bit as I was absolutely begging for him to not come in. In the middle of my thoughts, I heard something. Of the door being opened. The creepy guy slowly walked towards my counter, eyeing my whole body until he was right in front of me, heavily breathing and almost drooling. His breath reeked like alcohol and cigarettes. He had a musky scent that, to be honest, nearly made me vomit. Red flags were totally going off, but I just tried to continue with my nice act. He wouldn't stop staring at me. I glanced at my friend who was in the kitchen. He was pretty busy, basically making sure nothing was getting burned. I turned my attention back to the guy and, no matter what I asked him, he was silent. It probably went on like that for about 5 minutes straight. That is, until he finally said something.
Such beautiful skin. So young. Short black hair. Such a nice complexion you have.
Before I could even speak or try and call someone over, something I wasn't prepared for then happened. The old guy launched towards me and tried entering the counter part, which happened to be the same part I was working at. He then looked at me like I was a piece of meat. Trying to climb over the counter wasn't easy for him though, eventually trying to grab me and getting stuck midway as I tried backing up. To my luck, I then slipped and totally landed on my butt. I tried my best crawling away, hoping that he wouldn't pass through. I was of course rather startled and afraid to the point that I couldn't even utter a single word. My friend dropped what he was doing as he screamed for my manager to then come over. My manager quickly showed up, which then made the old guy get back up and then flee. My friend quickly ran to my aid and he took me to the back room, which is what my manager told him to do in order to calm me down. Shortly after, we called the cops. I glanced at my friend as he looked pretty pale and rather puzzled, like he saw a ghost. My manager waited at the counter for the cops. That's when my friend quickly explained who the guy was. As it turns out, the guy was known for creeping on the female staff members while they worked. He would take pictures, ask for their number, offer alcohol, and even documented what they looked like. He was actually already banned from even entering the place or even being near it. The cops were already very aware of who he was due to his creepy behavior in the past. After the whole investigation and getting questioned, it was about 1 a.m. and I was let go. My friend was with my other friend while I got questioned, and on my way home, my friend held my hand and kept reassuring me that everything will be fine. Safe to say, I don't think I'll ever go back there again, and after this, I don't think I trust any night shifts. I think I'm gonna work at a different fast food place as well. So to that creepy old guy who's hopefully in jail, please stay away from me.
I'm an 18-year-old female, and this happened to me just last week while working.
For context, I work for a widely popular pizza chain around the country as a delivery driver. I won't name the place or location. I mean, I'm not getting paid for advertisement. Anyway, the restaurant was busy all day every day, which meant that I'd be doing deliveries left and right. Business wouldn't start to slow down until at least an hour before closing, so it was hectic to say the least. One night, my boss had called me in on my day off, asking if I was able to work that night as someone had called out. After all, I wasn't really doing anything that night, so I said why not and drove over to work. The second I get there, I clock in, and it was then when our phone rang with a man's voice requesting a large pie. However, the second he knew I was a female, the tone in his voice completely changed. In a sort of flirtatious manner, he had given me the address and how he wanted the pizza delivered. I told my coworker that I needed one regular and to hand it to me when ready.
Introducing Domino's new Parmesan Stuffed Crust Pizza. If you love our buttery tasting pan pizza.
It was then when I noticed the order barely met our delivery radius, and I even asked my boss if it was still worth doing. I could tell he was in sort of a rush and didn't have time for questions or concerns, so I decided to do it. I put in the guy's address and went on my way to do what I hoped was my last delivery. It wasn't too far out, but it was then when I realized that the area I was in wasn't the best in town. It was one of those areas with run-down homes and unkept lawns where you'd commonly hear sirens every now and then. And being a small, petite college student, it was concerning being around here as crime here was at its highest. It was sketchy, but knew I could finally go home once I completed the delivery. I pull up to the townhouse my GPS led me to and immediately see that there were no cars in the driveway. However, there was a single light on, meaning there was indeed someone home. For those of you who don't know what a townhouse is, it's basically several homes fused together into one. Anyway, I step out of the car with the pizza in hand and knocked on the door as there was no doorbell. Within a minute, the door opens and I was greeted to a man who appeared to be in his mid-20s wearing, out of all clothes, a tuxedo. He was tall and his hair was a mess and honestly looked disheveled. The smell of strong alcohol could be noticed from his clothes, which wasn't attractive at all. He greeted me, introducing himself as Nate, and immediately grabbed the pizza from my hands. He opens it and looks back at me with a smile and says, "You know, I wouldn't be able to eat this pizza by myself. Would you mind coming inside to share?" I uncomfortably laugh and politely decline, telling him I had to go home and that I had to watch the carbs. However, he then insists, telling me how he was this great guy and how he could buy me all these nice things. This time in a more direct tone, I tell him no thank you, but that he was very thoughtful and to have a nice night. Suddenly, he then stops me, telling me he forgot to give me my tip. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $5 bill and handed it to me, making sure our hands touched. Now, this is the part where things really took a turn for the worst. As I was about to turn around and leave to go home, I hear clear as day this loud and blood-curdling scream from upstairs. He looks up at the pitch-dark hallway of his house and then back at me. It was then where his demeanor completely changed. This time, in a more serious tone of voice, he had said, I think it's time for you to go." I felt my blood run cold as he said this and ran back to the car, pulling out of his driveway, not looking back. As I'm in the car, I'm calling my boss, who was still at the restaurant, practically crying to him about the situation. He had said to come right back and that he was calling the police. When I arrived, police were already outside waiting with my boss. For a good while, I was questioned and gave them the address I made the delivery to. It's safe to say I didn't hear anything from police for a good week until I finally got a call back. Turns out, the man who I had made the delivery to had actually owned the house with his parents. The woman screaming was his now ex-girlfriend who he had caught cheating with another man. The part that disturbed me the most was that he had beat her numerous times after he found out. She had been in his house for days and wouldn't let her leave until she, quote, learned a lesson. He was obviously arrested, and his ex was taken to a hospital where she thankfully did survive. The next day, I quit my job and now work as a desk representative. If there's one thing I've learned from this, is that always trust your gut when something feels off. Around 3 years ago, I did deliveries for my dad's pizza business to make extra money for a car I wanted. I had just turned 17 and would do several deliveries for my dad whenever I could. I hated the idea of running the register or doing dishes, so my dad let me do deliveries instead. Realistically speaking, I'd work maybe 15 hours a week to help with my dad, and being a small business, we'd maybe get about 4 or 5 deliveries a day. If we didn't get deliveries that day, I'd always help my dad with cooking whenever he needed it. One night before closing, I had been sweeping the floor when my dad asks me if I could do one last delivery. I was tired, but knowing how hard my dad worked and how badly I wanted that car, I agreed. The customer who had ordered was located on the opposite side of town, which meant it would be a longer drive. I put the order into the back of the car, a single large pie, and got on the road. My GPS led me to the more rural side of town, the type of place where you would commonly see rundown homes and stuff like that. I had already been skeptical of this part of town, but realized it was another tip at the end of the day. I arrived to the house and I immediately noticed the red flags. Not a single light was on inside, and there were no cars in the driveway. A chill ran down my spine as I saw this, as I had never seen anything more sketchy. However, I always knew that you had to do things in life you didn't want to do, so I bit my lip and walked up to the house. The doorbell was completely damaged, so I knocked. Silence filled the air until I very faintly heard footsteps approaching the door before it opened. Standing at the door was an older-looking man, maybe in his 50s, giving me a friendly smile. This made me a bit more relieved now that I felt greeted, but was still hesitant. He politely asked if I was the pizza guy, to which I replied with a yes and handed him his food. For whatever reason, I asked him why all of the lights were off in his house. There was a short pause before he finally said it was because the power went out in his neighborhood. However, that's when I noticed that the rest of the homes had at least one light on, so I knew this was a lie. Not wanting to pry and too tired to care, I tell him to have a good night and went on my way. He then stops me and tells me he wanted to give me something special for being such a good person. This was weird, but I walked over to him and he then tells me to follow him inside. It was at this point where something told me to not do it and to get back in the car. I simply just stood by the door while he insisted I come inside. Now this is the part where things would have taken a terrible turn. As I was standing by the door frame, I could very faintly see by the stairs someone wearing what appeared to be a white mask. The man saw the look on my face and must have caught on to my suspicions. At that point, I run back to the car and drive the hell out of there, not looking back. I take a look in my rearview mirror, and thankfully nobody was following me as I left. All the while, I'm hyperventilating while on the phone with my dad, telling him everything. He had told me that he'd be on the phone with the police and to come straight home. Long story short, I was questioned by the police when they asked me to name the address. As it turns out, that house had been vacant for years as nobody ever lived there. Needless to say, police still went to that house, but like in most situations like this, whoever was there was gone. I still work for my dad's business, but we made a new rule where we wouldn't accept deliveries past a certain time. It's been a few years now, and nothing has happened since. This incident still comes back to me once in a while, and makes me think about what would have happened had I not seen the man in the mask. I worked as a delivery driver at my local Pizza Hut when I was a sophomore in college. It wasn't the best paying job, but it was enough to where I could pay bills and other things I wanted. Being a full-time student, I had a flexible work schedule, meaning I'd only work a few times per week. My typical hours were the weekends, which were the busiest days seeing as there were more customers. This incident happened on a Friday night while I was out doing deliveries. For context, I live in a small town of Tennessee, so there would be a lot of land around the area and nobody out on the road. The delivery I had gotten was located on the other side of town, where the more wealthier people resided. This was a plus, as the wealthier people tend to tip more and were generally a lot nicer than most people. I was on a long road with forests on both sides trying to get to the destination when, out of nowhere, I see a car tailing behind me. This wasn't common as these roads are mostly quiet during this time of night. For some reason, I had this feeling of dread inside and figured this person was up to no good. All the while, the car's horn is blaring nonstop to the point where I was trying to figure out what they wanted. All of a sudden, I hear the voice of a man from the car say something, but because of the wind, I couldn't hear him. That's when I slowed down where he yelled again, and that was when I could hear something along the lines of, "Your car's on fire." I look in my rearview mirror, and the trunk is full on smoking with small flames coming from my wheels. How I didn't see this, I have no idea, but I start screaming and pull over while running out of the car. Thankfully, the driver of the other car got out and made sure I was okay. Suddenly, a loud boom can be heard from the car, and half of the car is now in flames. Now this is the part where I could only describe to be the work of God. Turns out, this driver wasn't even supposed to be on this road. He had been coming home from work when, for whatever reason, he got this urge to turn onto the street even though it was the wrong way. The feeling was so strong that he thought he was crazy, but decided to finally do it, and that's when he saw me. When he said that, I stood there in utter shock. It took a while, but fire rescue came to put it out while I informed my boss. Unfortunately, the fire department couldn't figure out as to what caused the fire. I had taken a week off from work after that, and all delivery vehicles were inspected. Till this day, I thank that driver for getting me to notice as I thought he didn't have good intentions. If there hadn't been someone on that road that night, God only knows what would have happened to me. Thank God for that driver, and thank God I finally noticed. When I was around 24, I lost my full-time job as a freelance writer due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It got really bad around my area to the point where the company was losing money and had to lay off many workers. Because of this, I became broke and nearly got evicted from my apartment. During this time, I had my parents help out with rent and did DoorDash on the side to make some extra income. It wasn't the best paying job, but it helped me get around and paid for things I needed. I ended up doing deliveries pretty often and thought it was the perfect little side hustle. One night, I had been doing deliveries around the suburbs of my city. This was the type of area where you'd normally get more orders, which typically meant you'd get more money. So, I'm driving around when I get a delivery from a local mom and pop type of restaurant. It was a large order, and the person who had ordered it was on the other side of town, which was annoying. However, DoorDash charges more per mile, and seeing as it was a large order, I realized it was a bigger tip. Sucking it up, I drive the 25-minute drive to the given address and eventually pulled into a house with an unkept driveway. The house seemed okay, but the grass was tall and there didn't appear to be any lights on. This should have been the first red flag, but being young and naive, I dismissed it and proceeded with the order. Now, DoorDash has the option for a customer to request their order be left by the door, which is exactly what this person wanted. I walk up to the house, and as I'm about to put their order down, the front door opens where I was greeted to a man. He looked as if he had just woken up and said in a groggy voice if I was the delivery guy. Clearly annoyed, but not trying to be rude, I tell him yes. Then, for whatever reason, he asks me if I could bring it to his backyard for him, as that's where all of his guests were gonna be. Why he was having guests over during the pandemic was his problem, but I wasn't gonna get involved. While his request was weird, I didn't think much of it, as it was a large order and was definitely something you couldn't feed one person. Without hesitation, I make my way to the back, and right when I turn the corner, I see 4 chairs and a dining table beside a shed. As I put the food on the table, I look at the shed and thought I could see someone looking at me through the window. Even with it being dark out, I could still make out the face to be a woman. However, the weird part about it was that she appeared to be sad for some reason. It was kind of like that look you would give someone as if their whole life was falling apart. The closest term I could really describe it was depressed or disappointed. It was then where the man had come out and thanked me for my help. I then leave the house to go back home, still confused out of my mind. It wasn't until about a week later where I had met up with a friend in the area when I learned a harsh truth. I had told him about my weird delivery trip the other night to that man's house. Upon describing the man, he said he knew who I was talking about and he would do deliveries for him here and there. It was then where I had mentioned the woman I had seen, and that's when he told me something I didn't know. My friend and this man had managed to strike up a conversation one day and told him something personal. Turns out, his wife had suffered from a heart attack in his backyard one day and didn't survive. He was heartbroken and obviously grieved for a long while after her passing. From time to time, he had caught glimpses of her inside of his gardening shed, as she always loved planting. That was her go-to place for whenever she was feeling down or upset. Gardening was always her passion, and she'd do it whenever she could. That was the creepiest and saddest experience I've ever had while on any shift.
I recently moved across the country to a new town to go to school. I was able to land a job as a pizza delivery driver pretty easily. I've done this job before, and I like it because it's relatively easy and I make good money on tips. I work a lot of really late night shifts. A couple of weeks ago, I was working and at about 2 a.m. an order came in. It was for a large cheese pizza. At that hour, it was just a couple of us working, so I made the pizza myself and then put it in my car and went to deliver it. I didn't know the area very well, so I would always put the address in on my phone and then just follow the directions. I got in my car and typed it in. It said it was a 15-minute drive. As I drove, it seemed to be taking me into the middle of nowhere. I drove for about 10 minutes through woods with not a building or house in sight. Then finally, I was supposed to turn onto a little dirt road that I could barely see. If it hadn't showed up on my map, I would have almost certainly missed it. I slowed down and then turned onto the little dirt road. The map showed me continuing on this road for about 1 more mile, and then I would take a left, and the destination would be there. I began driving down the dirt road, which was surrounded by woods. Then suddenly, my phone lost signal. I wasn't all that surprised being so far out from the city, but I was concerned because I needed to find the house to deliver the pizza. I kept driving very slowly and looked for a road on the left side. Finally, I saw it and I turned. The road was another dirt one, but the woods on each side was even more dense. It was very eerie being out there on that road at that time of night, especially not knowing where I was. I drove down the road very slowly, looking on both sides for a house or some kind of building for whoever ordered a pizza out here. But all I saw was trees from the dense woods and some grass. I still had no service at all on my phone, but I knew I had to be close to where the delivery was supposed to be. It was very dark and hard to see.
El sabor sabroso de Luisiana y el crujiente Signature Chicken de Popeyes es la comida que merece tu antojo. Y ahora puedes llevar 3 piezas por solo $5 y hacer una comida completa por $3 más.
With the only lights coming from my headlights. I wasn't seeing any kind of buildings at all. I started to get a really creepy feeling being out there, and after about 5 minutes of driving down that road looking, I decided to turn around and go back, because I could clearly see that there was no buildings. I drove my car back to the other dirt road, and then back to where I had signal before. At last, I was finally able to get connection on my phone, and when I did, I looked at the map again, but the address had been erased and it was not there. I found the card that I had wrote the address on and put it back into my phone, but this time it said address not found. I decided I would just head back and try to figure out what was going on. When I got back to the store, I showed my boss the address and told him what happened. He looked surprised when I gave him this information. Then he told me that there are no houses or buildings in that area at all. I went back to look at the order that had come in, but it was gone. I chalked it up to a lack of sleep, but to this day, I really don't know how to explain what happened. Maybe I was just really tired, but it was still a really creepy experience. I am a pizza delivery driver. This was by far the scariest thing to happen to me. It took place about 1 year ago. I was working on a Thursday night, which were usually decently busy. I made quite a few deliveries, and the later it got, the more things calmed down. At about 1 in the morning, I got a delivery for a cheese pizza. I put it into my car and drove to the location, which was about 10 minutes away. It was in an area of town which I rarely delivered to and was a little more run down. I got to the address, which was a 2-story house with a pretty decent-sized yard and many overgrown plants and trees. It looked a little bit run down like most houses in the area and had a front porch that seemed to wrap around the house. I got out of my car, grabbed the pizza, and walked up the driveway to the house. Then I walked up the steps to the door and rang the doorbell. About 30 seconds went by, and I was about to ring the bell again when the door started to open. A man answered. He was fairly large and bald and looked to be in his 50s. He just stood there staring at me for a second. I said I had his pizza and handed it to him. He looked almost surprised and said, "Oh, okay, that's nice." Then he just looked around. He just seemed a little bit strange to me. Then he said to me that he had to get some cash to tip me and he would be right back. He went back inside and closed the door. I stood there waiting for a good 2 or 3 minutes, but the man still didn't return. I was thinking about just leaving when I heard some noise and figured the man must be coming back. But when I listened closer, it wasn't coming from inside. It was coming from outside on the porch. I looked around to the direction of the noise. Then I saw from the side of the house on the porch 3 men approaching me about 30 feet away. I guess it was just an instinct, but as soon as I saw them, I turned and sprinted back down the porch to the driveway. When I did, I heard all the men start to chase after me. I ran as fast as I could to my car and unlocked it and then jumped inside. I frantically started the engine and stepped on the gas. As soon as my car started moving forwards, the men reached me. I felt one of them kick my back door and another one tried opening the door on the other side, but I was just barely able to drive away. I sped out of the neighborhood and all the way back to the pizza place. I have to think that the pizza delivery was some sort of trap to lure me into getting robbed, or maybe even worse. I haven't delivered to that area much since, but when I do, I'm extra careful.
So, I had this part-time job when I was in high school, working as a pizza delivery driver for a large pizza chain. I saw some pretty wild stuff on the job, but only one thing that actually seriously creeped me out. I'm making this routine delivery to some innocuous-looking house, but when the guy answers the door, he just sort of grabs the pizza, thrusts a fistful of ones in my face, then slams the door behind him. At first, I'm just like, rude. But then when I count the money, I find that not only has this guy not given me enough for his 20-inch meat lovers, but he's not even bothered to tip me. I'd been burned once or twice before when it came to my count, and the difference ended up coming out of my wages, so I was not about to let that nonsense happen a third time. I ended up banging on the guy's door for like a solid 5 minutes before he answered. Like I could see him moving around behind the frosted glass panel, but totally ignoring my knocking. In the end, I lose my temper and say something like, "Hey man, don't try and finesse me out of money. I don't want to have to call the cops, but I will." Boom. Those were the magic words. He comes right up to the front door and opens it up. Not all the way, maybe a third of the way open. This guy is saying sorry a whole lot. Like almost too much. He's all pale, he's sweating, his hands are shaking as he passes me out a 20, just laying the sorry the whole time. I'm just thinking, what's this guy's problem? But then I catch a glimpse of something in the hallway behind the guy, and suddenly I've got a good idea what the guy's deal was. There's a dark red stain on the wooden floor, maybe the size of a manhole cover, and next to it are what look like all kinds of different cleaning products. I take one quick look at that, then at the guy, and he just slams the door in my face. I'm back in my car and speeding back to the pizza place faster than you can say F that. And as soon as I get there, I call the cops. As it turned out, I had legit interrupted this guy cleaning up a murder. And from what I heard, the guy was having an affair with a high school girl that was like 30 years his junior. She's over at his place while his wife is out of town, orders pizza at some point, then before it even arrives, the guy kills her because she's threatening to ruin his marriage or something. He had no clue that she'd ordered the pie, panics when I show up at the door, and that's how he got caught. Crazy story, right? But for me, the craziest part isn't so much the whole murderous infidelity thing. It's that before she was murdered, this girl unwittingly kicked off a chain of events that would catch her own killer. I had to go to court a bunch of times too, since I was basically the case's star witness, and it was so freaky seeing that guy looking at me when I talked to the prosecutor. He'd literally killed a girl with his own hands, and there he was, giving me death stares. Like I said, I've seen some wild stuff working pizza delivery, but only one thing that gave me nightmares. That guy's eyes. I used to work at a 7-Eleven here in the United States, and the scariest thing that ever happened to me there was also the single most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me in my life. It happened on a particularly quiet night, and I was still kind of hungover from going out drinking the night before, so I wasn't even paying attention when the guy walked into the store. I heard the door sliding open, I heard his footsteps as he walked up to the counter, and then right when I was about to lift my head up to ask him what he wanted, he just slammed something down on the counter in front of me. I remember the first thing being the red splatter on my t-shirt. It was plain white, and the moment his hand impacted on the counter, all these little red specks appeared on my shirt. I already recoiled from the shock of having his hand slammed down in front of me, but when I saw what he just slammed down next to the register, I recoiled even further. It was a tongue, an actual tongue. Even though it was soaked in blood, I could recognize the deep ridge running down the middle of it. It sounds like such a cliche when I think about it now, but I now know what people mean when they say that they were frozen in fear. The whole thing was an assault on my senses, and I think it just short-circuited my fight-or-flight mechanism to the point where I just didn't know what to do. Then the look in the guy's eyes as he stared at me, so calm but intense, with eyes so wide and unblinking that it was like he didn't have eyelids at all. It was only when he spoke that I actually found the will to move, and all he said to me was, "Call 911. I bolted into the back office, locked the door behind me, and immediately called the cops. All the while I watched the guy on the cameras just standing there at the register. He didn't move at all. He just seemed to be looking down and staring at the mess he'd left on the counter. And given the gruesome nature of my emergency, there was a police patrol car and 2 cops pulling up outside in just a matter of minutes. The guy didn't put up any kind of fight when they moved to arrest him. He just held his wrists, allowed them to put the handcuffs on him, then let the cops take him away. Once he was safely out of the store, I walked out of the office, trying not to look at what was on the counter, then told the cops everything I knew. It obviously wasn't all that much, but as I was talking to them, I noticed a few more police surrounding a car in the parking lot that still had the door open. I called the store manager from the McDonald's across the street, telling them that the cops had to close the store because it was an active crime scene. They rushed down to see what was going on, even though it was their day off, and after telling them what had happened, I went home to decompress. From what I heard later, the guy had gotten into an argument with his wife while out driving somewhere. Then at some point, he'd snapped, pulled up into a parking lot, stabbed her to death, then cut her tongue out. Then, for some reason, he picked our 7-Eleven to walk into to slam the tongue he'd cut out of her mouth down onto the countertop. I was allowed to take a little bit of time off of work after the whole thing, as I just couldn't face going back there so soon. Even when I did go back, I was on edge the whole time for my first couple of shifts, and I just couldn't seem to shake the image of that bloody tongue just lying on the countertop right in front of me. The thing I just can't seem to shake is that it wasn't enough for the guy to actually stab and kill his own wife. He had to reach into her mouth afterwards and cut her tongue out. How completely insane with fury does a person have to be to do that? Like, what could possibly possess someone to do something so horrifying to their own spouse? The guy didn't look like a monster either. He didn't look evil or deranged. All that gave his mental state away was that crazy look in his eyes, the one that had me frozen in fear. It just haunts me that seemingly normal people are capable of things like that. I work at a 7-Eleven part-time in between classes, and earlier this year, we got a little rush of customers in the early afternoon one time. I served 2 guys for coffee and smokes, and at the back of the line, there's this kid, no older than maybe 11 or 12, just waiting there patiently with a backpack in his hand. I actually thought that he looked kind of cute, like a little gentleman out doing some grocery shopping for his mom or something. He gets to the front of the line and I ask him, "What can I help you with, sir?" in a kind of jokey, playful way. Without a hint of emotion on his face, he just reaches into his backpack, pulls out a gun, and says, "Give me all the money." When he pointed it at me, I wasn't sure if it was real or not, because where the hell would a 12-year-old kid get their hands on a loaded gun like that? It's not like the 7-Eleven I work at is in some high crime area or whatever. It's actually located in a pretty nice place, and although I've heard one or two stories from coworkers about the trouble at the store, nothing had ever happened to me personally. There was one other guy in the store at the time, and I looked over at him to see him kind of smiling at the kid. Smiling and frowning, like he was amused but disapproved of the kid playing some dumb childish prank. I don't know guns, but I figured this guy did, so I tried calling this kid's bluff and asked him something like, "You shouldn't point toys like that, sweetie. The cops might think it's real." The kid responds by cocking the gun, and it has this real metallic sound that sends this kind of shock of fear running through me. I didn't know of any toy guns that made such a realistic sound, and as if to illustrate that he wasn't joking around, the kid pointed the gun in the air and actually fired a shot that went right over my head. After my ears got done ringing, and I came to, I heard "Give me all the money" in the same monotone, emotionless way, and I didn't hesitate in doing what he asked. I put as much cash as I could onto the countertop, then watched him fill his backpack with it before he just walked out of the store. I think the thing that scared me so much about it was that the kid just didn't seem to realize the gravity of the situation. He definitely seemed like he had something missing about him, like he didn't understand that he could have actually killed someone over whatever dumb thing he wanted to buy with that money, be it video games or candy or whatever it was. At least a grown-up armed robber understands that a gun is just a means of getting what he wanted, and it's not a good idea to fire it or whatever, just in case they accidentally shoot someone in the face. I get the feeling that even if I'd even tried to resist or tell the kid no, he'd have just shot me, because it's what he assumed he should do. It's almost surreal to me how the closest I've ever come to death is at the hands of a child, someone who should have been so innocent and carefree and full of love, but instead just felt nothing. We're going back almost 10 years ago now, but one morning I dropped my son off at school and then drove over to a nearby 7-Eleven with my infant daughter. It was pretty early in the morning, so there were only one or two other customers, and one of them was this older-looking guy with a walker who was slowly making his way around the store. I didn't pay him too much attention other than feeling kind of sorry for him. Then I picked up the few items I needed, then headed out to my car. Right as I'm putting my daughter in her car seat, I hear a voice behind me. I turn, and it's the old man with the walker, only there's something weirdly different about him than when I saw him in the 7-Eleven. He was walking upright, not leaning on the walker, and his voice sounded much younger than you would have expected from just looking at him. I remember all he said was, "Cute kid." Then as I turned around, I only got the slightest look at the guy and his brand new posture before he slammed the walker into the back of my legs. The force made my knees buckle, and I almost fell right on top of my young daughter. I'm not exactly the tallest woman in the world, so the height reduction from my knee buckling had me falling forward into my open car door, and I had really tried not to crush her as I fell. I honestly thought that he was trying to get me, which was bad enough, but when he grabbed me by the hair and started to drag me up and off of my daughter, I realized he was trying to get to her instead. I honestly didn't think that I could get any more terrified, but the realization that he was actually trying to take my infant daughter away from me was just too much to bear. I remember letting out the loudest, most ear-splitting scream I've ever let out in my life, begging him not to take my baby. He was so much stronger and faster than he looked, and I guess that was all part of his fiendish scheme to have everyone let their guards down around him. It honestly seems like divine intervention now that I look back at it. But someone was just pulling into the small parking lot just as he almost had a hand on my daughter, and seeing the struggle had them instinctively honking their horn over and over in a bid to break it up. I think they figured it was just an incident of spousal abuse or something, because They were just honking and didn't get out of their car until I screamed over and over again, "He's trying to take my baby." The moment they heard that, they came bursting out of their driver's side door. But then the guy sprinted past the passenger side and out towards the main highway. The second he did, another car comes speeding up and stops by him, which I first thought might have been another person coming to tackle him or something. But instead, the guy climbs into the second car and it speeds off with a screech of its tires. What horrified me in the aftermath was that it was quite clearly a well-planned and almost perfectly executed attempt to kidnap my daughter, and I wouldn't be surprised in the least bit if it had worked on a previous occasion. After the kind stranger calmed me down, they helped me call the cops as I tried my best to calm my daughter down in turn. She was still too young to really know what was going on, but she picked up on my distress enough to be wailing and crying until I managed to lull her off to sleep. The cops who arrived at the 7-Eleven a short while after said that they'd never heard of such a thing happening there before, but they were able to check the street cameras outside the 7-Eleven to try and get a clear image of the getaway car's number plate. I stuck around long enough to find out that the car's plates came back as stolen, and the cop I spoke to said that there was a good chance that they just ditched the vehicle somewhere after wiping it down for prints. If they had already planned such a detailed operation out, there was a good chance they planned for that too. The only saving grace was that the officer assured me that my report was a step towards catching them. A small step, but a step nonetheless. The horrifying experience I went through that morning wasn't for nothing, as not only did the cops now have a description of the guy who tried to do the kidnapping, but their failure to kidnap my daughter meant that they'd probably hesitate before trying the same plan again. I took a lot of comfort in that idea, and if it wasn't for the cop taking the time to reassure me of that, I don't think I'd have dealt with the trauma of it as half as well as I did in the months that followed. But I did a lot of praying too. Desperate prayers that whoever had planned such a horrifying kidnap would never, ever be successful, and that no one else would have to endure the pure horror that I had.
During a time when I was done with college and wasn't able to find a job right away, I took a job at a 7-Eleven because I needed money. I worked mostly late night and overnight shifts. What I liked about this was that there wasn't many people that came in, and I would have a lot of free time by myself to play on my phone or listen to podcasts. I was always a night owl, but I didn't really like staying up all night when I would have to work those hours. Anyways, I'd been working there for maybe about 2 months, and one night I was working by myself very late. It was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but I don't remember the exact time. The location that our 7-Eleven is at is on a road just off the highway, and we're really busy during the day, but not so much at night. We got several customers early on, and for the first few hours, I had quite a bit to do actually. But now, we would get only like one person every 20 minutes or so, and I started to get bored. I noticed in the back corner of the store where we had the soda machine and icy machines, there was a spill on the floor. Seeing as though we didn't have any customers, I decided to go over and mop it up. I left the counter and walked over to the back near the bathrooms where we kept the mop, then over to the corner where the spill was. I saw the spill. Looked like Coca-Cola. Thankfully, the floor hadn't gotten all gross and sticky yet, and the mop was working well. As I was mopping, I suddenly heard the sound of the front door opening and somebody walk inside. Realizing I wasn't at my counter, I rested the mop against the wall and looked over to see who had entered our store. Where I was, you couldn't see the front door, and whoever was in the front door couldn't see me either. I could, however, just see the front counter. I saw somebody standing at the front counter with their back to me. They seemed to be looking around as though they were looking for someone who worked there. Realizing I needed to go back there, I took a couple of steps over to them, and as I did, I noticed them turn and their head went to the side. They hadn't noticed me, but I did see them looking to the side, revealing that they were wearing some sort of mask. It appeared to be a really creepy-looking clown mask. I then noticed that he was wearing a dark blue jacket and his right hand was in his pocket. Immediately I got a bad feeling, as if he was up to no good and possibly looking to rob the place. I froze in place, telling myself to stop being scared for no reason and to just go. I thought, what are the odds he's trying to rob the store? It had never happened before. But as I was standing there, I watched the man then go around and behind the counter himself. As a pure reaction to this, I jumped behind the nearest aisle and hid. I could hear the man messing with stuff behind the counter, and it sounded like he was going through the cash register. I figured he was in fact robbing the place, and as I was hiding back there, I decided to call the police. I got up my phone and dialed, but as soon as I heard the 911 operator answer the phone, I suddenly heard the man go quiet from whatever he was doing and say something. Out of fear, I quickly hung up the phone and held my breath. I heard the man shout from behind the counter, asking who was inside and to come out now. He spoke in a loud and demanding tone. I wasn't going to, though. I was way too scared to move. At this point, I just wanted to get out of there. I knew our store was being robbed, but they didn't pay me enough to try to stop this guy. I just wanted to call the police again, but obviously the man could hear me if I did. I heard his footsteps moving out from behind the counter and get a little bit closer to me. But then they stopped, and I didn't hear anything. I was not moving a muscle, and I was being as quiet as I possibly could be. Then, I heard the door to the building open and shut. I guessed that the guy was leaving, because I didn't hear anything else for about a minute after that. Finally, I got up and slowly took a few steps out. I still heard nothing, and knew this had to mean that the guy was gone. I walked over to the counter to examine what exactly the man had done, and how much he had took. When I got there, though, I passed by the front of the counter where I could see clearly outside. I saw that the man was standing right in front of the door, looking inside, with his creepy clown mask still on. I jumped back when I saw this, and the man started to walk inside. I ran back towards the end of the store where I had hid before, and I heard the man come in and shout at me to come out and stop hiding like a baby. His footsteps were fast approaching mine, and I knew I probably wouldn't be able to hide from him this time. I was ducking down and quietly moving through aisles to try to hide from the man. This continued for probably a minute, and I knew I couldn't keep this up for much longer. I could hear where the man was, but suddenly, I heard the man yell a curse word and then run back to the front and leave the building again. I was confused, but this time decided to stay hiding. Out of curiosity, though, I took a quick peek outside. This time, I saw a police car in the parking lot, and it turned its flashing lights on as I saw another car starting to drive away. I stayed hidden until I saw the police stopping the man, and I knew it was safe. I guess my call to the police had gone through, even though I hadn't been able to speak with them. Luckily, the man was caught, and after this night, I decided I didn't want to work overnights again. I still worked there for another few months, even working late shifts, but didn't have to work by myself again.
My name is Jordan, and at the time I was 12, and I had just gotten my first Facebook account, and I had my friends and family friends on there. My mom and I had just finished shopping at our local Walmart, and we were headed to our car. This time, which was unusual, we parked near the back of the parking lot. As we left the building, I glanced over to the side, and I saw a particularly tan and skinny guy. He was wearing one of those neon green Nike shirts with black pants. His hair was messed up and shiny, and he was smoking a cigarette. We finally made it to our car and started unloading. Side note, my mom is very religious. She always wants to see the sunny side of situations, and that nobody can be that dangerous. We started loading our car with groceries when the man was suddenly behind us. He was especially close to my mom's purse. Maybe he's just a druggie wanting money? He grabs some groceries and starts handing them to us. He then says,
"Oh, I'm just here to help, you know?"
Which was weird because he wasn't even wearing anything that said he was an employee. After he helps with the groceries, he's now right behind me, extremely close. My mom said something to me which mentioned my name, and the man goes,
"Jordan? That's a very pretty name. Here you go, Jordan."
He hands me a half-eaten candy bar. I take it after shooting my mom a glance with the "what the heck" kind of look. She doesn't see a problem. "Where are you two ladies headed?" he asks. My mom replies, but I didn't want to hear what she said. But I got in the car and immediately threw the candy away. I told her that was weird and uncomfortable, and she pretty much blows me off, just saying he was being nice. Something didn't feel right though. It gave me chills in my core. We made it home, which I immediately noticed a beat-up truck slowing around the corner of the street and slowly going by. We went on with our day, and it was about 3 to 4 days later that I then received a message on Facebook from an account with a male profile picture. I was new to Facebook, and I wasn't sure how to set it up or how to manage who could message me. It didn't look like the guy, but the message was implied that it was.
Hi Jordan, this is Mike from Walmart.
I very obviously didn't respond because I knew it was creepy enough. My mistake was not telling my parents. See, my parents have sheltered me from the internet for my whole life. If they found out I was ever in danger online, they'd take away my electronics and I'd have to go back to having all of my devices monitored with no freedom. So I didn't reply. An hour or two goes by, and I start receiving calls, and even more calls. I had to silence my Facebook notifications. It all started at,
"Why are you ignoring me?"
to,
"I'm going to kill you,"
until he finally stopped. It was scary, but I assumed people online threatened anything they could. Fast forward a month or so, and I then get an email.
"Hi Jordan, it's me, Mike again. How are you?"
I don't reply. It goes on again for another week, email after email. Each one got a little meaner. The last email I remember was the worst. It was basically him confessing his love for me, telling me how beautiful he thought I was, and how I wasn't weird, and that he loved me. As the email continued, it got more and more disgusting and graphic. The end telling me how he wants to sexually assault me and slice my throat. I was terrified and also disgusted. I didn't tell my mom, which I really wish I did. I'm still so mad with myself that I didn't speak about it. I'd always thought I could be different from all the other girls if I was ever put into a situation like that. I told myself I wouldn't ever let anyone silence me, but I was really scared I'd be in trouble. I reported and deleted all of the emails and the pictures of them from my phone, which I was really stupid to do. Only the next day, I get another email from a different account. All it said was,
"I'm going to find your house and kill you."
I stayed up all night for 4 nights straight. Another few days go by, and it's almost time for bed, and I step outside to let my miniature husky do her business. Our garage overhead door is locked pretty much every night by my dad, who has the keys. My older siblings have snuck out before, so only he has the keys. He told me to close the garage door when I came in, and that he'd lock it before he went to bed. Thank God I locked the garage side door. After my husky's done, I call her in, and I then close the garage overhead door. It was heavy, so it's not like wind could pull it up. As I go to close it, I see the same red beat-up truck that came by months ago. I can still remember waking up to a banging noise on one of the downstairs doors. I looked at my phone and memorized the time, 4:37 a.m. The banging and rattling of the downstairs doors went on for what seemed like an hour, but it was only about 10 to 15 minutes. I didn't sleep for a while. Maybe it was a coincidence and some high guy stumbled to our house. I don't know. The next morning, my mom walked outside and she found our garage overhead door was wide open I guess she didn't hear the banging or the door rattling. My room was upstairs right over the garage, while my parents' room was at the other end of the house. I know I closed that garage door. I can't help but think that it was him that night. My parents still don't know about what happened.
I spend my days as a humble worker at 7-Eleven. More specifically, I was a store manager and franchise owner. I was no software engineer or doctor, and while my family did have their opinions on what I did for a living, my job paid rather well. I was a very different man in my past, but deciding to go the route of franchising a store was a more hands-on career path that mostly kept me in check. It was a low-stress but high-labor job, and that was honestly perfect for me. The job was almost therapeutic to me. It gave me something to take care of, something to look forward to every day. Of course, I couldn't do this alone. Working with me in my daytime shifts were workers Molly and Adam. Molly and Adam were young. They were working there to pay off their college tuition. We all considered ourselves like a family to each other. Molly, Adam, and I grew super close to each other in our time working there. They were like the kids I never had, and this naturally made me a little protective over them. We would always encounter weird or upset customers, and it was usually me who had to stand up for them. I didn't want anything to happen to them. They were so young. Nothing bad had happened to Molly or Adam yet, and I was grateful for that. But one early morning, that changed. It was a Tuesday morning. I want to say the incident occurred around 9 a.m. The sun was out and things seemed to be going normal. This time of day was always peaceful. There was usually never any problems. Eventually, a blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. Inside of the car was a rather average-looking middle-aged man. He stepped out of the car and started filling it with gas. While the pump was going, he then proceeded to the front of the store. As per their training, Molly and Adam greeted him. The man just nodded and started walking around the aisles. He then looped back around the store, approached Molly, and started flirting with her. Molly was visibly uncomfortable, and while I wanted to go to the back of the store and do my inventory logging, I couldn't do this, not with the man hitting on Molly like that. Adam, however, told me that he could handle the man if he started acting any weirder, and naturally, I trusted him. I reluctantly stepped in the back room and started counting down and logging all the items that were there. While I was doing this, however, I kept looking back towards the man to see what he was doing. It seemed like the man was looking back at me as well. This was odd for a number of reasons. Customers aren't supposed to be this close to the back of the store, and he kept awkwardly peering in through the utility room. To make things worse, every time I looked back, the man started to try and act busy. It was like he was trying to pass time or look natural for some reason. I stepped out of the room and asked the man if I could help him. He seemed to awkwardly and rudely shun me off and keep pacing around the store pretending like he was looking for something. For some reason, I decided to ignore all these red flags and continue my work in the back. Eventually, while Molly was passing by the back room, she whispered to me that the man was making her very uncomfortable. I told her that once I finished with the shelf I was working on, I would quickly go outside and help her. I essentially told her to hang in there and wait behind Adam. It was super confusing what the man even wanted. He seemed to have stopped flirting with Molly completely and was instead focused on trying to peer through the back door for some reason. As annoying as this was, I just wanted to get through my work. I had one last crate of granola bars to log down and I didn't want this weird man to stop that. But that's when I heard a commotion coming from the main room. "Excuse me, sir, you're not allowed to be back there. What are you trying to pull off?" "Call the police, Adam," I heard Molly exclaim right after that. I quickly ran out of the storage room to see what was happening and saw the commotion. The man in the blue car was trying to pull something off. I saw Molly in shock and fear in the corner, and Adam with his fists up standing right in front of her. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I asked the man. Whoa, what kind of place is this? What's even back there? What are you guys hiding?" "Get out of here, the sign clearly says employees only." "You expect me to just sit here and let you get away with this? No way in hell." We were all in complete shock. Adam tried to calm the man down, however. "Sir, we don't need to get violent, okay? You can just calm down and we don't have to— I don't want to hear another word from you psychos." The man snapped back at Adam. Molly started to cry. She was ready to dart out the store. The man then started reaching for his pocket. We had no idea what he was going to pull out. I tackled the man in the back of the shop and screamed at Adam and Molly to just head away and call the police. A few more minutes of us rustling in the utility room occurred. I managed to headlock the man, but he just kept hitting me off. After a few more minutes of us rustling and fighting in the back, the cops eventually got there. But sadly, they couldn't find him on the scene. We got the man's face on security camera, and his car was still at the pumps. We had both his face and his license plate on camera. Despite all this, the police just left. They couldn't find any sign of him, and they assumed that he just ran out through one of the other back doors. As the cops left, I made sure to dump the man's body right next to the first. As I mentioned before, I was a different man in my past. This job really changed me. It seemed like the man in the blue car clearly noticed the other body I had. Normally it's pretty well hidden. Not even Molly or Adam could find it. But I guess one of the legs must have been sticking out or something like that while I was moving stuff around. I re-looked at the security footage to make sure there was no evidence left behind. It seemed like the man wasn't reaching for a gun or a knife. He was reaching for his phone to call the police. I really didn't want it to be this way, but he knew my secret. The man was now part of my collection. Molly and Adam still have no idea what happened, and you bet I'm planning to keep it that way. They can't find out anything about my past. If they did, they'd be shattered. For now, my secret remains safe from the public eye, and I will ensure no one remembers that day.
For quick background info, I was 12 years old when this occurred. I'm 14 now. I have 2 younger brothers. For the sake of this story, we'll call them Dylan and Tyler. They share a room on the 2nd floor, and the room is at the front of the house with a balcony door facing the street. Straight behind their room is a hallway, and my room is on the left of that hallway if you're looking from the front of the house. There's 2 windows facing the side of my house and my room. At the time of this story, I was in my brother's room watching Tyler play a video game. I think it was Cuphead. This will be important later. This took place in mid-July of 2019. It was nearing the end of the day. I and my mom had decided to order in for herself and my dad. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Well, about 10 minutes later, my mom randomly starts walking in my brother's room and looking at the shutters on the door. Me and my brothers don't really pay any attention until we notice she keeps doing it, and she looks much more nervous than normal. My brothers ask what's wrong, and my mom surprisingly, and she tells us that the delivery driver was sending her really weird messages, such as, God is coming. He will come for all who don't believe. Believe, and he'll bring you to paradise. Tyler was starting to get nervous, but I was much more confused than anything. But that confusion turned to fear, as not even 3 minutes later, this delivery driver was right outside our house, empty-handed, screaming and laughing, obviously high off his mind. At this point, Tyler was nearly in tears, and I was absolutely horrified, but I didn't do anything. I couldn't do anything. But as quickly as he came, he was gone. My mom filed a complaint with both the restaurant and the delivery service, and the next day she was notified that he had been terminated. That in and of itself wouldn't be that bad, but it gets worse. Now for this next part. I can't confirm that these 2 events were related, but the timing suggests it was. The day my mom was notified of the delivery driver's termination went on like normal, and around 10:30 p.m., I was the only person awake. This was pretty customary. My brothers like going to bed early, and I think my parents were asleep, but I can't be sure. Anyways, around that time, I noticed out my window the motion light turn on. At first I thought it was the neighbors, but I realized soon that it was ours. And the thing about our motion sensor light is that something pretty noticeable has to trigger it. Something like a mouse won't. I looked outside and I didn't see anything until I looked to my right, just out of the light's radius. That's when I noticed something. Someone. Then I realized someone is in my backyard and I'm the only one awake. It didn't even occur to me that I could wake up my parents, but instead, I dug down under the window, praying whoever was out there didn't see me. I'm honestly astounded that 12-year-old me didn't even scream. But I think he noticed me, because when I checked again about 5 minutes later, he was gone. I'm 99% sure that it was the same guy, and he was either scouting out the place or trying to scare us. But thankfully, nothing else happened after that. I only remembered this recently because my mom brought it up, and all of the memories of it came flooding back. So to the crazy high screaming delivery driver that I'm nearly positive was trying to break in, Stay the fuck away from me and my family. This happened during autumn of 2013. I was working as a delivery boy for a pizza place. I lived in southern Ontario, in a fairly modestly sized city. I was doing what was possibly the longest drive that I'd ever taken for a delivery. It was in the middle of a forested area, about 25 minutes away from the place I worked at. The place that I worked for is on the outskirts of the city, so it wasn't really unusual for us to get rural deliveries. When I finally pulled up to the address in question, it was an old, disheveled, dilapidated house, totally surrounded by forest. I called on my boss and I asked him twice just to make sure this is the correct address. I could tell he was in a crappy mood, so I didn't want to bother him any further. I just took a deep breath and then walked to the front door of the house. There was no doorbell, so I decided to knock loudly just to make sure that the residents heard me. No response. I waited for about a minute before knocking again, saying that I was the pizza guy. Still no response. As I began to turn around to get back to my car, I saw a pair of eyes from an open window, staring intently and directly at me. After about 5 seconds of that person staring at me so eerily, I just dropped the pizza and ran back to my car. The damn thing wouldn't turn on until I turned my keys for the third time. I didn't get too far away from the house when the car then began jolting. Then an awful screeching sound started, forcing me to stop the car. When I got out and looked at my tires, my blood froze. Just what I had feared. All 4 of the tires were slashed. I thought to myself, who the fuck did this? I mean, I saw that person in the window while I was at the front door. I then went back to my car and called the emergency services. I explained my situation to them to the best of my ability. The operator then told me that the police would be there in about half an hour. I then asked her if it would be best to stay in the car or run away. She said that it would probably be best to stay in my car. I waited anxiously for the police to arrive while I was still on the line with the operator. What happened next utterly broke me, and I truly hope that nobody else ever has to experience this level of fear. While I was examining my surroundings, I looked in the overhead mirror and I saw that same person before that was in the open window, right in the middle of the road behind my car. I could tell now that it was a man, eyes open even wider than before. Then I could ever so slightly see a demented smile then spread across his face. I just swung open the door and fled into the woods, not giving a second crap about me and my life. I ran until I was nearly out of breath, then hid behind a log and some shrubs. I waited for what felt like an hour until I finally heard a siren wailing in the distance. I gathered all the stamina I had left and ran back to my car. By the time I got back, police were inspecting my car. I ran to them shouting for help like a lunatic. I fell to the ground and then coughed from running so much. 2 officers then picked me up and questioned me. I told them the situation, and they sent most of the officers in the house, but one stayed with me for company. Eventually the officers came out with a knife, obviously the one used to slash my tires. One officer said that it was probably some sick, insane couple who did this, given that I saw the man. Unfortunately, they were never found, and that still really pains me to this day. I obviously quit my job right after that, and I began working in a department store in the city. But I'll never forget the look on that man's face when he stared at my car, pitch black darkness. Hello. Before I start this story, I want to give you a backstory real quick. I'm an 18-year-old female living in Mesa, Arizona. I had started door dashing to make some extra money, as working a hostess really wasn't paying the bills like it used to. My little sister, who's 16, and my mom and I had just moved down here from Phoenix, so this is somewhat of a different area to DoorDash in than I'm used to. We started off doing a couple of runs around the area until I got a ping that I have a new order. It was for Little Caesars. I pulled up the map and I headed that way. When we arrived, I had sent in my sister to get the order. While she was in there, I was looking around the parking lot. It was pitch black outside, other than my headlights and the store sign. I noticed a white Jeep and a few teenage guys getting inside of it. I didn't pay much attention afterwards. When my sister got back in the car with the order, I proceeded to the delivery address, with my sister talking to me and music blaring. I pulled into the neighborhood that the map took me to. I then turned on the music to look for the house. We stopped in the middle of the street in front of the house, not realizing that a guy was coming to my door. Now, he didn't say anything at first. I said, "Did you order DoorDash?" And he said, "Yeah," with a little hesitation. I looked behind him, and I saw that there were 2 other guys heading towards my driver's side door as well. I didn't notice that they had just pulled into the driveway, and they were driving a white Jeep. Before I go any further, my boyfriend has a switchblade knife that he always carries around, so I automatically know the sound of it being opened and closed. After he said yes, I noticed that he got closer to my window, and I was looking at my phone, about to ask him what the name for it was. And when I looked back at him, he was fiddling in his pocket on his right side. He kept looking back and nudging his head forward, kind of in a motion like, "Come here," to the other guys. All of a sudden, when I was about to roll my window down to give him his order, I heard the click, and that's when my brain just pieced it all together. He gave me a weird look, and I said, "You know what, fuck this." And I rolled up my window to where there was about an inch until it was closed, and then locked all the doors and took off. I didn't hear anything from them. They didn't yell out for us. I was really freaking out, and my sister didn't know why I pulled off like that. I explained to her what I heard, and then she pieced it all together as well. When I turned off their street, they then called me and said, "Yeah, this is Mario." And I said, "Yeah, are you the guy I just talked to?" And he said, "Yeah." And then I asked him why I heard a switchblade go off in his pocket, but he ignored the question. I asked him again, and it sounded like he was rushing to get into a car. I then pulled off into a curb, and I told him where he could pick up his food, and then hung up. We sat at the other end of the street for 10 minutes, and when we went back, the food was still there. We picked up the food again, and I was just gonna call DoorDash and tell them what happened, and ask that they get a refund, until I saw the teenagers pass by, and look straight at me, and stop the car. I turned super quickly in the other direction, and I saw one of them get out of the car, then jump back in, and they then turned around and started following us. Now, I'm a crazy driver in general, but when someone's following me, my fight or flight kicked in, and I lost them pretty quickly. I called DoorDash and explained to them what happened, and made a report. I don't know what those teenagers were up to, but as a female out at night with her little sister, I was terrified. Not just for me, but for my sister. Some of you may think that I was being overdramatic, and maybe they did just want their food. But if you were in my situation, what else could you really do? It was my safety and my sister's. I called up my boyfriend and told him everything that happened, and I couldn't stop shaking for the rest of the drive home. I couldn't ever figure out why they were at Little Caesars and got there before us. I know it was them who was there. Maybe they were following me back. Maybe not. I guess I'll never know. On the other hand though, I didn't call the cops. There probably wasn't much they could have done anyways, except for file a report. But let's just say, I'll never DoorDash in that area again.
I am a driver for DoorDash. This happened just a couple of months ago. It was a Thursday night and I was working late. I typically worked until 2 a.m. on Thursdays, and it would be a pretty good money-making night for me. It was late and I was almost done, but at about 1:30 in the morning, I got an order to pick up. It was at McDonald's and it was just a medium drink. It seemed a little weird to me that somebody would have just a drink from McDonald's delivered, but I wasn't going to question it. I went to McDonald's and picked it up, then I drove to the destination. It wasn't that far, between 5 and 10 minutes away, but when I got into the neighborhood, I could see that it wasn't the best area. The houses looked very run down and old, and the grass in most yards was very long. I turned onto a dead-end road and finally reached the address. It was at the end of the dead end, and I could barely see the house because of how dark it was, combined with how many trees they had in the yard. There was a woods surrounding the house, and no street lights or house lights. I slowly stopped my car and got out. I looked around. It was very quiet. I walked to the end of the driveway of the house and looked down it. It was skinny, but fairly long. It had pine needles and sticks all over it, and looked like it didn't get much use. I looked down and saw the house, and then I began walking. I got about 10 feet down the driveway, and then I heard the branches in a tree next to me start to move. Immediately when I heard the sound, I knew it couldn't have been an animal and had to be a human. Without even thinking, I placed the drink on the ground, turned around, and ran back to my car. As I was running, I heard movement behind me, but I didn't stop to look. I ran all the way back to my car and got inside. When I did, I immediately started my engine, and the lights to my car came on. Out of my windshield, I saw in front of my car about 30 feet away, there were 3 men. They were not chasing me anymore, but they were just standing at the end of the driveway looking at me. Then one of them turned and threw the McDonald's drink at my car. It hit the ground about 5 feet in front of my vehicle. I backed up my car and drove away. I hope I don't have to deliver to that neighborhood again. A couple of years back, I worked as a Postmates delivery driver on the weekends. I lived in a city at the time, so I could ride my bike to make the deliveries. I liked it because I could get more exercise. One night, on a nice Friday night in the summer, I was working for a few hours. I remember it was sunny and warm. At about 8 p.m., I got a delivery for an order of a sub-restaurant. I rode my bike and picked it up, and then I rode to the address. When I arrived at the address, it was an apartment building on the edge of the city next to a park. I got off my bike and walked up to the front door. After a couple of minutes went by and nobody came, I texted the man and said I was there. A few seconds later, I got a response. He asked if I could bring it up to his room on the 2nd floor, and he said he would buzz me in. I didn't mind at all, and I said that I would. The man let me in, and I walked up the stairs to the 2nd floor and to the room he told me. I knocked on the door. The man opened it and smiled. He seemed very friendly. He said thank you to me and mentioned that he would give me a nice tip. Then I heard a woman's voice say thank you as well, coming from inside the room. I said no problem, and I left. Then I walked back down and outside of the apartment to my bike and continued with my deliveries for the evening. About 2 hours later, I got another delivery near the same area, and my route took me past that same park. But as I rode past the apartment building, I noticed an ambulance and several police cars outside of it. I was going to ignore it and ride past when I caught a glimpse of the man that I had delivered to. He was being led into a cop car. I had to stop my bike quick and ask what happened. I didn't get much information, but I did hear that a man had nearly killed a woman. Later, when I went home, I found out that the very same man I had delivered to was with a woman that night that he met for the first time, and he tried to force himself on the woman, and she resisted. That started a struggle between them, and the woman ended up breaking her arm and being knocked unconscious. The man was arrested, and the woman was taken to the hospital. It's crazy to me that I delivered to them, and they both seemed so happy just a few hours before. When I was a senior in high school, I worked as a pizza delivery boy. It was a pretty good paying job with tips, and I enjoyed it a lot. One night on a Friday, I was working and got a delivery for one pizza to a house on the other end of town. I made the drive to the house, which took about 10 minutes, and then I arrived. I stepped out of the car and started to walk up to the house. It was a small and average-looking house, kind of old, nothing eye-catching. I walked to the front door, but when I got there, I noticed a post-it note stuck to the door that said to use the back. I walked around to the back door of the house, which was located in the center of the house in front of a small fenced backyard with a little patio on it. I was about to knock on the door when I saw another post-it note. It said, "Please bring pizza inside." Now this made me a little bit uncomfortable, but I decided to go in anyways. I could hear music playing from inside the house. When I opened the door, I saw what appeared to be a kitchen. It was pretty empty though. There was no food or plates out, but on the kitchen table near the door, there was a Bluetooth speaker that was playing music. I started to place the pizza box on the table, and I saw yet another sticky note posted there. It said, "Bring pizza downstairs and I will give you your tip." I looked to the end of the kitchen and saw an open doorway with a staircase leading to a very dark basement. This is where I had to draw the line in my head. I decided I would have to skip the tip on this one, and I was not going to go down the stairs. I left the pizza on the table and started to walk away to leave. But then, the music on the speaker stopped playing, and a deep man's voice started speaking on it and said, "Stop." Then it said, "Why don't you come downstairs?" I wasn't going to stay there any longer, and I quickly opened the door and left. When I did, I could hear the deep man's voice laughing. I ran back to my car and drove all the way back to the restaurant. A few weeks later, when I was working, I got a delivery, and when I started driving, I noticed it was the address of that creepy house again. I really did not want to go back there, but it was my job, and I didn't want to tell my boss I was scared, so I continued driving. Once I arrived, I took a good look at the house. I could see a note was on the door again. I sat in my car for a good minute, hyping myself up to go back to the house. I finally got out and started walking straight to the back, but when I noticed the front door, the sticky note said something different on it this time. I walked up to the front door and looked closer. The note said, "Come in the front door this time," and then it had a smiling, winking face on it. I just dropped the pizza on the front step and knocked on the door 2 times and then left. I hurried back to my car, got in, and drove back to the restaurant again. Thankfully, I never had to deliver to that house again.
So I just moved to California about 4 months ago, and everything's been pretty much a dry run for the worst. My car got rear-ended, my living situation absolutely sucks, and I'm now more broke than I've ever been in my life. I've also had some pretty creepy experiences out here that have definitely forced me to be more on my guard. I come from a small town where you can walk the streets at 2 in the morning and arrive home in one piece. But I now live in a really large part of LA where you have to keep your eyes peeled 24/7. It also doesn't really help that I watch a lot of crime shows and have now become terrified to leave my apartment after these following events. The first happened to my rental car that I was given due to my car accident. I was a full-time DoorDash driver trying to make ends meet in an attempt to squirrel away some cash, as I knew I'd be relying on Lyft rides and would need basic things such as groceries when my time with the rental eventually ran out. My DoorDash shifts typically ran from early in the morning to late in the evening, as LA gas prices and the fancy grocery rates aren't going to pay for themselves. All of that, along with my rent to my crazy roommate. Anyway, fast forward, and I dragged myself and my silver Sentra to a grocery store that wasn't too far away from my complex. The incident was short, simple, and very common. I was pulling into a space at the same time as another car. It was a larger tan SUV. At first, I didn't really get a good look at the people inside the vehicle, and without thinking of any circumstance, I pulled in. Now in hindsight, I probably should have submitted and just given the spot to them. However, it was a really long shift, I was tired, and the spot was really close to the grocery stores. It was dark outside after all, and I figured the shorter walk would be safer. Now, to this day, I can't tell you what possessed me to stay put. Normally I would have gotten out and just put my headphones in without thinking, but this time, something stopped me. I looked back and I noticed the car had parked diagonally behind me. I could easily look back from the driver's side window and see them, and they pulled in so their faces were towards me. There were two very oversized men in baseball caps, just looking at me. There was something in the stare that kept me locked solid in the vehicle. I locked all of my doors and kept looking back every so often. They kept their eyes glued on my every move. I felt a terrible feeling wash over me as I then put the car in reverse and exited the lot. Not much of a story, I know, but I really do wonder what the two large men would want with a 5'3" petite woman like myself. The worst part of the story is that I really believe I saw the same men in a different parking lot just a few days later. They were parked already and took no note of me, as I luckily sped off into the night. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I'm back at Enterprise. Well, it's the day I have to give the car back, and I'm dreading it. I should also mention that I really don't know anyone in the state of California, and I'm 2,000 miles away from my hometown. I knew that I'd be stranded at home from then on out until I found a car. Sitting at home without any weed can really be a major crisis in a time like this. The one lucky part of this story is there happens to be a dispensary about 3 minutes away from my complex. Well, I decided to take one for the team and walk there. I dressed head to toe, covering my skin. I also made sure to leave early so that there would be more people around. I even had a friend from home on the phone with me the entire time. Unfortunately for me though, this plan fell flat on its face. I walked 1 minute down the road to a gas station, and when I paused at the crosswalk, a dirty-looking man in a white truck made eye contact with me. His windows were rolled down, and he was paused at the stoplight. This is another time where I can be thankful for my intuition, as I just felt something wasn't right about that look in his eye. I stayed out until he drove out of sight, and then made my way, passing the crosswalk. I realized that the man had doubled back and followed me by truck. He made a U-turn and everything. His eyes were still attached to me as I ran back towards the busy gas station and through the busy crosswalk. To my amazement, he turned around yet again, just as I had. He passed me, but not before making that same eye contact with me again as he drove off. This time I stayed put and called for an Uber. Sometimes it's just more worth it to shell out the extra $6. Overall, the time here's been pretty rough, and I really wouldn't recommend moving to the state unless you have people you know here and a good place to live. Please stay safe out there.
Refresh the everyday with Mentos Gum. Yes to fresh.
I spend my days as a humble worker at 7-Eleven. More specifically, I was a store manager and franchise owner. I was no software engineer or doctor, and while my family did have their opinions on what I did for a living, my job paid rather well. I was a very different man in my past, but deciding to go the route of franchising a store was a more hands-on career path that mostly kept me in check. It was a low-stress but high-labor job, and that was honestly perfect for me. The job was almost therapeutic to me. It gave me something to take care of, something to look forward to every day. Of course, I couldn't do this alone. Working with me in my daytime shifts were workers Molly and Adam. Molly and Adam were young. They were working there to pay off their college tuition. We all considered ourselves like a family to each other. Molly, Adam, and I grew super close to each other in our time working there. They were like the kids I never had, and this naturally made me a little protective over them. We would always encounter weird or upset customers, and it was usually me who had to stand up for them. I didn't want anything to happen to them. They were so young. Nothing bad had happened to Molly or Adam yet, and I was grateful for that. But one early morning, that changed. It was a Tuesday morning. I want to say the incident occurred around 9 a.m. The sun was out and things seemed to be going normal. This time of day was always peaceful. There was usually never any problems. Eventually, a blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. Inside of the car was a rather average-looking middle-aged man. He stepped out of the car and started filling it with gas. While the pump was going, he then proceeded to the front of the store. As per their training, Molly and Adam greeted him. The man just nodded and started walking around the aisles. He then looped back around the store, approached Molly, and started flirting with her. Molly was visibly uncomfortable, and while I wanted to go to the back of the store and do my inventory logging, I couldn't do this, not with the man hitting on Molly like that. Adam, however, told me that he could handle the man if he started acting any weirder, and naturally, I trusted him. I reluctantly stepped in the back room and started counting down and logging all the items that were there. While I was doing this, however, I kept looking back towards the man to see what he was doing. It seemed like the man was looking back at me as well. This was odd for a number of reasons. Customers aren't supposed to be this close to the back of the store, and he kept awkwardly peering in through the utility room. To make things worse, every time I looked back, the man started to try and act busy. It was like he was trying to pass time or look natural for some reason. I stepped out of the room and asked the man if I could help him. He seemed to awkwardly and rudely shun me off and keep pacing around the store pretending like he was looking for something. For some reason, I decided to ignore all these red flags and continue my work in the back. Eventually, while Molly was passing by the back room, she whispered to me that the man was making her very uncomfortable. I told her that once I finished with the shelf I was working on, I would quickly go outside and help her. I essentially told her to hang in there and wait behind Adam. It was super confusing what the man even wanted. He seemed to have stopped flirting with Molly completely and was instead focused on trying to peer through the back door for some reason. As annoying as this was, I just wanted to get through my work. I had one last crate of granola bars to log down and I didn't want this weird man to stop that. But that's when I heard a commotion coming from the main room. "Excuse me, sir, you're not allowed to be back there. What are you trying to pull off?" "Call the police, Adam," I heard Molly exclaim right after that. I quickly ran out of the storage room to see what was happening and saw the commotion. The man in the blue car was trying to pull something off. I saw Molly in shock and fear in the corner, and Adam with his fists up standing right in front of her. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I asked the man. Whoa, what kind of place is this? What's even back there? What are you guys hiding?"